Chapter 1. The Ideal Audience. Arch Lector Sult was standing by his huge window when Glokta arrived, tall and imposing as always in his spotless white coat, gazing out across the spires of the university towards the house of the Maker. A pleasant breeze was washing through the great circular room, ruffling the old man's shock of white hair and making the many papers on his enormous desk crackle and flutter. He turned as Glokta shuffled into the room. "Was glad to peel like the wine, Inquisitor," he said simply, holding out his white-gloved hand, the great stone on his ring of office catching the bright sunlight from the open window and glittering with purple fire. "I serve and obey, your eminence." Glokta took the hand in his and grimaced as he bent down to kiss the ring, his cane trembling with the effort of keeping upright. "Damn it if the old bastard doesn't hold his hand a little lower every time, just to watch me sweat." Sult poured himself into his tall chair in one smooth motion, elbows on the tabletop, fingers pressed together before him. Glokta could only stand and wait, his leg burning from the familiar climb through the house of questions, sweat tickling his scalp, and wait for the invitation to sit. "Please be seated," murmured the Arch Lector, then waited while Glokta winced his way into one of the lesser chairs at the round table. "Now tell me, has your investigation met with any success?" "There was a disturbance at our visitors' chambers the other night. They claim that plainly an attempt to add credence to this outrageous story." "Magic," Sult snorted his disdain. "Have you discovered how the breach in the wall was really made?" "Magic, perhaps? I am afraid not, Arch Lector. That is unfortunate. Some proof of how this particular trick was managed might be of use to us. Still." And Sult sighed as though he had expected no better. "One cannot have everything." "Did you speak to these people?" "I did. Bayaz, if I may use the name, is a most slippery talker. Without the aid of anything more persuasive than the questions themselves, I could get nothing from him." His friend the Northman also bears some study. One crease formed across Salt's smooth forehead. "You suspect some connection with this savage Bethod?" "Possibly, possibly," echoed the Arch Lector sourly, as though the very word was poison. "What else?" "There's been a new addition to the merry band, I know. The Navigator. Why do I even bother?" "Yes, your eminence. A navigator. Good luck to them. Those penny-pinching fortune-tellers are always more trouble than they're worth, blubbering on about God and what have you. Greedy savages. Absolutely." "More trouble than they're worth, Arch Lector, though it would be interesting to know why they have employed one." "And why have they?" Glokta paused for a moment. "I don't know," snorted Sult. "What else?" Following their nighttime visitation, our friends were relocated to a suite of rooms beside the park. There was a most grisly death a few nights ago, not 20 paces from their windows. Superior Goyle mentioned this. He said it was nothing to concern myself about, that there was no connection with our visitors. I left the matter in his hands. He frowned at Glokta. "Did I make the wrong decision? Oh dear me, I need not think too long over this one." "Absolutely not, Arch Lector." Glokta bowed his head in deep respect. "If the Superior is satisfied, then so am I." So what you are telling me is that, all in all, we have nothing. Not quite nothing. There is this." Glokta fished the ancient scroll from his coat pocket and held it out. Sult had a look of mild curiosity on his face as he took it, and unrolled it on the table, stared down at the meaningless symbols. "What is it?" "So you don't know everything. I suppose you could say that it's a piece of history. An account of how Bayaz defeated the Master Maker. A piece of history." Sult tapped his finger thoughtfully on the tabletop. "And how does it help us?" "How does it help you, you mean? According to this, it was our friend Bayaz who sealed up the house of the Maker." Glokta nodded towards the looming shape beyond the window. "Sealed it up. And took the key. That tower has always been sealed. Always. As far as I am aware, there is not even a keyhole. Those were precisely my thoughts, your eminence." Slowly, Sult began to smile. "Stories are all in how you tell them, eh? Our friend Bayaz knows that well enough, I dare say. He would use our own stories against us, but now we switch cups with him. When I enjoy the irony." He picked up the scroll again. Is it authentic? Does it matter? Of course not. Salt rose gracefully from his chair and paced slowly over to the window, tapping the rolled-up scroll against his fingers. He stood there for some time, staring out. When he turned, he had developed a look of the deepest self-satisfaction. It occurs to me that there will be a feast tomorrow evening, a celebration for our new champion swordsman, Captain Luthar. That cheating little worm. The great and the good will be in attendance. The Queen, both princes, most of the closed council, several leading noblemen. Not forgetting the king himself. It has come to something when his presence at dinner is not even worth mentioning. That would be the ideal audience for our little unmasking, don't you think? Glokta cautiously bowed his head. Of course, Arch Lector, the ideal audience. Providing it works. It might be an embarrassing audience to fail in front of. But Salt was already anticipating his triumph. The perfect gathering and just enough time to make the necessary arrangements. Send a messenger to our friend, the first of the Magi, and let him know that he and his companions are cordially invited to a dinner tomorrow evening. I trust that you will attend yourself. Me? Glokta bowed again. I would not miss it for anything, Your Eminence. Good. Bring your practicals with you. Our friends might become violent when they realize the game is up. Barbarians of this sort who can tell what they might be capable of. A barely perceptible motion of the Arch Lector's gloved hand indicated that the interview was finished. All those stares, just for this. Salt was looking down his nose at the scroll, as Glokta finally reached the threshold. The ideal audience, he was muttering, as the heavy doors clicked shut. In the north, a chieftain's own carls ate with him every night in his hall. The women brought the food in wooden bowls. You'd stab the lumps of meat out with a knife, and with a knife you'd cut them up. Then you'd stuff the bits in your mouth with your fingers. If you found some bone or gristle, you'd toss it down on the straw for the dogs. The table, if there was one, was a few slabs of ill-fitting wood, stained and gouged and scarred from having knives stuck in it. The carls sat on long benches, with maybe a chair or two for the named men. It'd be dark, especially in the long winters, and smoky from the fire pit and the chaga pipes. There'd often be singing of songs, usually shouting of good-natured insults, sometimes screaming of bad-natured ones, and always a lot of drink. The only rule was that you waited for the chief to begin. Logen had no idea what the rules might be here, but he guessed there were a lot. The guests were sat round 3 long tables set out in a horseshoe, 60 people or more. Everyone had their own chair, and the dark wood of the tabletops was polished to a high sheen, made bright enough for Logen to see the blurry outline of his face in by hundreds of candles scattered round the walls and down the tables. Every guest had at least 3 blunt knives, and several other things scattered about in front of them that Logen had no idea of the use for, including a big flat circle of shiny metal. There was no shouting and certainly no singing, just a low murmur like a beehive as people muttered between themselves, leaning towards each other as if they were swapping secrets. The clothes were stranger than ever. Old men wore heavy robes of black, red, and gold, trimmed with shining fur, even in the heat. Young men wore tight-fitting jackets in bright crimson, green, or blue, festooned with ropes and knots of gold and silver thread. Women were hung with chains and rings of glittering gold and flashing jewels, wearing strange dresses of vivid cloth that were ridiculously loose and billowing in places, painfully tight in others, and left others still entirely, distractingly bare. Even the servants were dressed like lords, prowling around behind the tables, leaning forward silently to fill goblets with sweet, thin wine. Logen had already drunk a deal of it, and the bright room had taken on a pleasant glow. The problem was the lack of food. He hadn't eaten since that morning and his stomach was growling. He'd been eyeing the jars of plants sat on the tables before the guests. They had bright flowers on them and didn't look much like food to him. But then they ate some strange things in this country. There was nothing for it but to try. He snatched one of the things from the jar, a long piece of green plant with a yellow flower on the end. He took a nibble from the bottom of the stem, tasteless and watery, but at least it was crunchy. He took a larger bite and munched on it without relish. I don't think they're meant for eating. Logen glanced round, surprised to hear the northern tongue spoken here, surprised that anyone was speaking to him at all. His neighbor, a tall, gaunt man with a sharp, lined face, was leaning towards him with an embarrassed smile. Logen recognized him vaguely. He'd been at the sword game holding the blades for the lad from the gate. Ah, mumbled Logen round his mouthful of plant. The taste of the stuff got worse with time. Sorry, he said once he had forced it down his throat. I don't know much about these things. Honestly, neither do I. How did it taste? Like shit. Logen held the half-eaten flour uncertainly in his fingers. The tiled floor was spotlessly clean. It hardly seemed right to toss the thing under the table. There were no dogs anyway, and even if there had been, he doubted they'd have eaten the thing. A dog would have had more sense than him. He dropped it on the metal platter and wiped his fingers on his chest, hoping that no one had noticed. "My name is West," said the man, offering his hand. "I come from England." Logen gave the hand a squeeze. "Ninefingers, a Bryn. From way up north of the high places. 9 fingers." Logen waggled his stump at him, and the man nodded. "Ah, I see." He smiled as though remembering something funny. "I heard a song once in England about a 9-fingered man. What was he called now? The Bloody Nine. That was it." Logen felt his grin slipping. One of those northern songs, you know the kind, all violence. He cut off heads by the cartload. This Bloody Nine, and burned towns and mixed blood with his beer and whatnot. "That wasn't you, was it?" The man was making a joke. Logen laughed nervously. No, I never heard of him, but luckily West had already moved on. "Tell me, you look like you've seen some battles in your time." "I've been in some scrapes. It was pointless to deny it." "Do you know of this one they call the King of the Northmen? This man Bethod?" Logen glanced sideways. "I know of him. You fought against him in the wars." Logen grimaced. The sour taste of the plant seemed to be lingering in his mouth. He picked up his goblet and took a swallow. "Worse," he said slowly as he set it down. "Worse," he said slowly as he set it down. "I fought for him." This only seemed to make the man more curious than ever. "Then you know about his tactics, and his troops, his way of making war." Logen nodded. "What can you tell me about him?" "That he's a most cunning and ruthless opponent, with no pity or scruple in him. Make no mistake, I hate the man. But there's been no war leader in his league since the days of Scarling Hoodless. He has that in him which men respect, or fear, or at least obey. He pushes his men hard, so he can make the field first and choose his own ground. But they march hard for him because he brings them victories. He's cautious when he must be, and fearless when he must be, but neglects no detail. He delights in every trick of war, in setting traps and ambushes, in mounting feints and deceptions, in sending sudden raids against the unwary. Look for him where you expect him least, and expect him to be strongest where he seems the weakest. Beware him most of all when he seems to run. Most men fear him, and those that don't are fools." Logen picked up the flour from the plate and started snapping it into pieces. "His armies are grouped about the chieftains of the clans, some of them strong war leaders in their own right. Most of his fighters are thralls, peasants pressed into service, lightly armed with spear or bow, fast-moving in loose groups. In the past, they were ill-trained and taken from their farms for only a short time, but the wars have been raging for so long that many of them have become hard fighters and show scant mercy." He began to arrange the bits of plant, imagining they were groups of men and the plate a hill. Each chieftain keeps carls besides, his own household warriors, well-armed and armored, skilled with axe and sword and spear, well-disciplined. Some few have horses, but Bethod will keep those out of sight, waiting for the best moment to charge or pursue. He pulled the yellow petals from the flower, and they became horsemen hidden on the flanks. Last there are the known men, the named men, those warriors who have earned great respect in battle. They might lead groups of carls on the field, or act as scouts or raiders, sometimes far in the enemy's rear. He realized the plate was covered with a mess of broken pieces of plant, and brushed them hurriedly off onto the table. That's the tradition of war in the north, but Bethod's always had a fancy for new ideas. He's read books and studied other ways of fighting, and often talked of buying flat bows and heavy armor and strong war horses from the southern traders, and of making an army to be feared throughout the world. Logen became aware he had been talking solidly for ages. He hadn't said half that many words together in years, but West was staring at him with a look of rapt attention. "You speak like a man who knows his business. Well, you've happened upon the one subject on which I might be reckoned an expert. What advice would you give to a man who had to fight a war against Bethod?" Logen frowned. "Be careful. And watch your back." Jezal was not enjoying himself. At first, of course, it had seemed a delightful idea, just the thing he had always dreamed of. A celebration in his honor attended by so many of the Union's greatest. Surely it was only the start of his wonderful new life as a champion of the contest. The great things which everyone had predicted, no, promised for him were almost arrived, poised like overripe fruit to drop from the tree and into his lap. Promotions and glory were sure to follow close behind. Perhaps they would make him major tonight, and he would go to the war in England as commander of a full battalion. But, strangely, it appeared that most of the guests were more interested in their own affairs. They chattered to each other about government matters, about the business of merchant houses, about issues of land and title and politics. Fencing, and his remarkable skill at it, were scarcely mentioned. No immediate promotion had been forthcoming. He simply had to sit there and smile, and accept the odd lukewarm congratulation from strangers in splendid clothes who barely even looked him in the eye. A wax effigy could have done the same job. He had to admit, the adulation of the commoners in the arena had been considerably more gratifying. At least they had sounded as if they meant it. Still, he had never before been within the palace compound, a fortress within the fortress of the Agrient, where few indeed were permitted to tread. Now he was seated at the top table in the king's own dining hall, though Jezal did not doubt that his majesty took the majority of his meals propped up in bed, and most likely had them fed to him with a spoon. There was a stage set into the wall at the far end of the room. Jezal had once heard that Ostus, the child king, had jesters perform for him at every meal. Morlik the Mad, by contrast, had staged executions there to go with his dinner. King Casimir, it was said, had likenesses of his worst enemies shout insults at him from that stage while he took his breakfast every morning, to keep his hatred for them fresh. The curtains were closed now, though. Jezal would have to look for his entertainment elsewhere, and in this regard the pickings were slim indeed. Marshal Varus prattled on in his ear. He, at least, was still interested in fencing. Unfortunately, he talked of nothing else. I never saw such a thing. The whole city is buzzing with it. Most remarkable bout that anyone's ever seen, I swear. You're better even than Sandan Glokta used to be, and I never thought to see his like again. I never dreamed you had it in you to fight like that, Jezal. Never had the slightest inkling. Said Jezal. The Crown Prince Ladisla and his bride-to-be, Therese of Talons, made a dazzling couple at the top of the table, just beside the dozing king. They were oblivious to all that was going on around them, but hardly in the way that one might hope for from two young lovers. They were arguing viciously, in scarcely hushed voices, while their neighbors studiously pretended not to suck in every word. Well, I'll be going to war soon in England, so you need not suffer me too much longer, whined Ladisla. I might be killed. Perhaps that would make your highness happy? Pray don't die on my account, returned Therese, her Styrian accent dripping venom. But if you must, you must. I suppose I will learn to bear the sorrow. Somebody nearer at hand distracted Jezal by thumping on the table. Damn these commoners! Damn peasantries up in arms in Stericland! Lazy dogs, they refuse to work a stroke. It's these taxes, grumbled the man's neighbor. These war taxes have them all stirred up. Have you heard about this damned character they call the Tanner? Some bloody peasant preaching revolution, open as you please. I heard that one of the king's collectors was set on by a mob, not a mile outside the walls of Keln. One of the king's collectors, I say. By a mob, not a mile outside the city walls. We've damn well brought it on ourselves. The speaker's face was out of sight, but Jezal recognized him by the gold-embroidered cuffs on his gown. Morovia the High Justice. Treat a man like a dog and sooner or later he'll bite you. It's a simple fact. Our role as governors, and as noblemen, is surely to respect and protect the common man, rather than to oppress and scorn him. I wasn't talking about scorn, Lord Morovia, or oppression, just about them paying what's due to us as their landlords, and for that matter their natural betters. Marshal Varus, meanwhile, had not let up for an instant. It was quite a thing, eh? The way you put him down. One steel against two. The old soldier swished his hand around in the air. The whole town's buzzing. You're bound for great things now, my boy. Mark my words. Bound for great things. I'll be damned if you don't have my seat on the closed council one day. It really was too much. Jezal had put up with the man for all those months. He had somehow imagined that if he won, that would be the end of it. But it seemed he would be disappointed in this, as in so much else. It was strange, But Jezal had never fully realized before what a boring old imbecile the Lord Marshal was. He was realizing now, though, and no mistake. To further add to his dismay, there were several people seated about the tables who would most definitely not have been among his chosen guests. He supposed he could make a dispensation for Sult, the Arch Lector of the Inquisition, since he sat on the closed council and was without doubt a powerful figure. But Jezal could not comprehend why he might have brought that bastard Glokta with him. The cripple looked even more ill than usual, twitching eyes sunken in dark circles. For some reason, he was occasionally shooting grim and suspicious glances at Jezal, as though he suspected him of some crime or other. It was a damn cheek, what with it being his feast and all. Even worse, on the other side of the room was that old bald man, the one who had called himself Bayas. Jezal had still not got to the bottom of his strange words of congratulation at the contest, or his father's reaction to the man, for that matter, and he had his hideous friend, the nine-fingered barbarian, beside him. Major West had the misfortune of being seated next to the primitive, but he was making the best of it. Indeed, the two were engaged in a lively conversation. The Northman broke into sudden peals of laughter and thumped the table with his big fist, making the glasses rattle. At least they were enjoying themselves at his party, Jezal thought sourly, but he almost wished he was down there with them. Still, he knew that he wanted to be a big, important man someday, to wear things with a lot of fur and a heavy golden chain of office, to have people bow and scrape and fawn before him. He had made that decision long ago, and he supposed he still liked the idea. It was just that, up close, the whole thing seemed so awfully false and boring. He would much, much rather have been on his own with R.D., even though he had seen her the night before. There was nothing boring about her. "The savages are closing on Ostenhorn, that's what I heard," someone shouted over on Jezal's left. "The Lord Governor Meade, he's raising an army and has sworn to turn them out of England." Ha! Meade? That swollen-headed old fool couldn't turn a pie out of a dish. Enough to beat these northern animals, though. What? One good Union man's worth 10 of their kind. Jezal heard Therese's voice cutting suddenly shrill above the hubbub, almost loud enough to be heard at the far end of the room. "Of course I will marry where my father commands me, but I don't have to like it." She appeared so vicious at that moment that he would not have been surprised to see her stab the crown prince in the face with her fork. Jezal felt somewhat gratified to see that he was not the only one who had trouble with women. Oh, yes, a remarkable performance. Everyone's talking about it. Varus was still droning. Jezal squirmed in his chair. How long was this bloody business going to take? He felt suffocated. He glanced across the faces again and caught Glokta's eye, staring at him with that grim, suspicious look on his wasted face. Jezal still couldn't meet that gaze for long, his party or no. What the hell did the cripple have against him anyhow? The little bastard. He cheated, somehow. I know it. Glokta's eyes tracked slowly across the table opposite, until they lighted on Bayaz. The old fraud was sitting there, quite at home, and he had some part in it. They cheated, together. Somehow. "My lords and ladies," the chatter faded as the Lord Chamberlain rose to address the room. "I would like to welcome you all, on His Majesty's behalf, to this humble gathering." The king himself stirred briefly, gazed vacantly about him, blinked, then closed his eyes. "We are gathered, of course, in honor of Captain Jezal dan Luthar, who has recently added his name to that most select roll of honor, those swordsmen who have been victorious at the summer contest." A few glasses were raised, and there were some half-hearted mumblings of agreement. "I recognize several other winners among the assembly here today, many of them now the holders of high office. Lord Marshal Varus, Commander Valdis of the Knights Herald, Major West down there, now on Marshal Burr's staff, of course. Even I was a winner in my day." He smiled and looked down at his bulging paunch. "Though my day was some time ago, of course." A polite ripple of laughter passed round the room. "I notice that I don't get a mention. Not all winners are enviable, eh? Victors at the contest," continued the Lord Chamberlain, "have so often gone on to great things. I hope, and indeed we all hope, that it may prove so for our young friend, Captain Luthar. I hope he meets a slow death in England, the cheating little bastard." But Glokta raised his glass along with everyone else to toast the arrogant ass, while Luthar sat there, loving every instant of it. And to think, I sat in that very chair, being applauded and envied and clapped on the back after I won the contest. Different men in the big clothes, different faces sweating in the heat, but nothing very much has changed. Was my grin really any less smug? Oh, snot. If anything, I was worse, but at least I earned it. Such was Lord Hoff's commitment that he did not stop toasting until his goblet was entirely empty. Then he shoved it back on the table and licked his lips. And now, before the food arrives, a small surprise has been prepared by my colleague Arch Lector Salt in honor of another of our guests. I hope you will all find it diverting. And the Lord Chamberlain sat heavily back down, holding his empty goblet out for more wine. Glokta glanced across at Salt. A surprise from the Arch Lector? Bad news for somebody. The heavy red curtains of the stage rolled slowly back. They revealed an old man lying on the boards, his white garment daubed with colorful blood. A broad canvas behind depicted a forest scene beneath a starry sky. It reminded Glokta rather unpleasantly of the mural in the round room. The room beneath Severard's crumbling pile by the docks. A second old man swept on from the wings. A tall, slender man with remarkably fine, sharp features. His head was shaved bald, and he had grown a short white beard, but Glokta recognized him immediately. Iosif Lestek, one of the city's most respected actors. He gave a mannered start as he noticed the bloody corpse. "Ooh," he wailed, spreading his arms wide in an actor's approximation of shock and despair. It was a truly enormous voice, loud enough to make the rafters shake. Confident that he had the undivided attention of the chamber, Lestek began to intone his lines, hands sweeping through the air, towering passion sweeping across his face. "So here at last, my master Juvens lies, and with his death all hope of peace now dies, by Canidia's treachery undone. His passing is the setting of the sun upon an age." The old actor threw back his head, and Glokta saw tears sparkling in his eyes. A neat trick, to cry on demand like that. A lonely drop trickled slowly down his cheek, and the audience sat spellbound. He turned once again to the body. "Here brother murders brother. Old slow time can never have recorded such a crime. I half expect to see the stars go out. Why does the ground not open up and spout some raging flame?" He threw himself down on his knees and beat upon his aging breast. "Oh, bitter fate! I would most happily now join my master, but it cannot be. For when a great man dies, we that remain, though in a narrowed world, must brave the pain and struggle onward." Lestek looked slowly up towards the audience, slowly clambered to his feet, his expression shifting from deepest sorrow to grimmest determination. "For though the Maker's house is locked and barred, all carved from rock and steel, all wondrous hard, if I must wait until that steel is rust, or with my bare hands crush that rock to dust, I'll have my vengeance." The actor's eyes flashed fire as he flicked out his robe and strode from the stage to rapturous applause. It was a condensed version of a familiar piece, often performed, although rarely so well. Glokta was surprised to find himself clapping. Quite the performance so far. Nobility, passion, command. A great deal more convincing than another fake Bayaz I could mention. He sat back in his chair, easing his left leg out under the table, and prepared to enjoy the show. Logen watched with his face screwed up in confusion. He guessed that this was one of the spectacles that Bayaz had spoken of, but his grip on the language wasn't good enough to catch the details. They swept up and down the stage with much sighing and waving of their hands, dressed in bright costumes, and speaking in some kind of chant. Two of them were supposed to be dark-skinned, he thought, but were clearly pale men with black paint on their faces. In another scene, the one playing Bayaz whispered to a woman through a door, seeming to plead with her to open it. Only the door was a piece of painted wood, stood up on its own in the middle of the stage, and the woman was a boy in a dress. It would have been easier, Logen thought, to step around the piece of wood and speak to him or her directly. Logen was sure of one thing, though the real Bayaz was seriously displeased. He could feel his annoyance mounting with each scene. It reached a teeth-grinding peak when the villain of the piece, a big man with a glove and an eye patch, pushed the boy in the dress over some wooden battlements. It was plain that he or she was meant to have fallen a great distance, even though Logen could hear him hit something soft just behind the stage. How fucking dare they? The real Bayaz growled under his breath. Logen would have got all the way out of the room if he could, but he had to be content with shuffling his chair towards west, as far from the Magus fury as possible. On the stage, the other Bayaz was battling the old man with the glove and the eye patch, although they fought by walking round in circles and talking a lot. Finally, the villain followed the boy off the back of the stage, but not before his adversary took an enormous golden key from him. "There's more detail here than in the original," muttered the real Bayaz, as his counterpart held up the key and spouted some more verse. Logen was little further on when the performance came to a close, but he caught the last 2 lines, just before the old actor bowed low. "Pray your indulgence, at our story's end, our humble purpose was not to offend." "My fucking old arse it wasn't," hissed Bayaz through gritted teeth while fixing a grin and clapping enthusiastically. Glokta watched Lestek take a few last bows as the curtains closed on him, the golden key still shining in his hand. Arch Lector Salt rose from his chair as the applause died. "I am so glad you enjoyed our little diversion," he said, smiling smoothly round at the appreciative gathering. "I do not doubt that many of you have seen this piece before, but it has a special significance this evening. Captain Luthar is not the only celebrated figure in our midst. There is a second guest of honor here tonight, none other than the subject of our play Bayaz himself, the first of the Magi." Zalt smiled and held out his arm towards the old fake on the other side of the room. There was a gentle rustling as every guest turned from the Arch Lector to look at him. Bayaz smiled back. "Good evening," he said. A few of the worthies laughed, suspecting some further little game perhaps, but Salt did not laugh with them, and their merriment was short-lived. An uneasy silence descended on the hall. A deadly silence, perhaps. The first of the Magi. He has been with us in the Agrient now for several weeks. He and a few companions. Salt glanced down his nose at the scarred Northman, and then back to the self-styled Magus. Bayaz. He rolled the word around his mouth, allowing it to sink into his listeners' ears. "The first letter in the alphabet of the old tongue. First apprentice of Juven's. First letter of the alphabet. Is that not so, Master Bayaz?" "Why, Arch Lector," asked the old man, still smirking, "have you been checking up on me? Impressive. Even now, when he must sense the game will soon be over, he sticks to his role." Salt was unmoved, however. "It is my duty thoroughly to investigate anyone who might pose a threat to my king or country," he intoned stiffly. "How fearsomely patriotic of you. Your investigations no doubt revealed that I am still a member of the closed council, even if my chair stands empty for the time being. I believe Lord Bayaz would be the proper term of address." Zolt's cold smile did not slip even a hair's breadth. "And when exactly was your last visit, Lord Bayaz? It would seem that someone so deeply involved in our history would have taken more of an interest over the years." "Why, if I may ask, in the centuries since the birth of the Union, since the time of Herod the Great, have you not been back to visit us?" "A good question. I wish it had occurred to me. Oh, but I have been. During the reign of King Morlik the Mad, and in the civil war which followed, I was tutor to a young man called Arnault. Later, when Morlik was murdered, and Arnault was raised to the throne by the Open Council, I served as his Lord Chamberlain. I called myself Bealevelland in those days. I visited again in King Casimir's reign. He called me Zoller, and I had your job, Arch Lector." Glokta could barely contain a gasp of indignation, and heard others from the chairs around him. "He has no shame, I'll give him that. Bealeveld and Zoller, 2 of the Union's most respected servants." And yet, he pictured the painting of Zoller in the Arch Lector's study, and the statue of Bealeveld in the king's way. Both bald, both stern, both bearded. But what am I thinking? Major West is thinning out on top. Does that make him a legendary wizard? Most likely this charlatan merely picked the 2 baldest figures he could find. Salt, meanwhile, was trying a different tack. "Tell me this, then, Bayaz. It is a story well known that Herod himself doubted you when you first came to his hall, all those long years ago. As proof of your power, you broke his long table in 2. It may be that there are some skeptics among us here tonight. Would you consider such a demonstration for us now?" The colder Salt's tone became, the less the old fraud seemed to care. He dismissed this latest effort with a lazy wave of his hand. "What you speak of is not juggling, Arch Lector, or playing on the stage. There are always dangers and costs. Besides, it would be a great shame to spoil Captain Luthar's feast simply so I could show off, don't you think? Not to mention the waste of a fine old piece of furniture. I, unlike so many others these days, have a healthy respect for the past." Some was smiling uncertainly, as they watched the two old men fencing with each other, perhaps still suspecting an elaborate joke. Others knew better and were frowning hard, trying to work out what was going on, and who had the upper hand. High Justice Morovia, Glokta noticed, looked to be thoroughly enjoying himself, almost as if he knows something we don't. Glokta shifted uncomfortably in his chair, eyes fixed on the bald actor. Things are not going as well as they should be. When will he begin to sweat? When? Someone placed a bowl of steaming soup in front of Logen. No doubt it was meant to be eaten, but now his appetite was gone. Logen might be no courtier, but he could spot folk working up to violence when he saw them. With each exchange between the two old men, their smiles slipped further. Their voices became harder. The hall seemed to grow closer and more oppressive. Everyone in the room was looking worried now. West, the proud lad who'd won that sword game because of Bayaz's cheating. The feverish cripple who'd asked all the questions. Logen felt the hairs on his neck rising. There were two figures lurking in the nearest doorway. Black-clothed figures, black-masked. His eyes flicked across to the other entrances. Each held two of those masked figures, two at least, and he didn't reckon they were here to collect the plates. They were here for him and Bayaz. He could feel it. A man doesn't put on a mask unless he's got some dark work in mind. There was no way that he could deal with half that many, but he slid a knife from beside his plate and hid it behind his arm anyway. If they tried to take him, he'd fight. That didn't need thinking about. Bayaz was starting to sound angry. I have supplied you with all the proofs you've asked for, Arch Lector. Proofs, the tall man they called Salt gave a cold sneer. You deal in words and dusty papers. More the business of a sniveling clerk than the stuff of legend. Some would say that a magus without magic is simply a meddling old man. We are at war and can take no chances. You mentioned Arch Lector Jezal. His diligence in the cause of truth is well documented. You, I am sure, must understand mine. He leaned forward, planting his fists firmly on the table before him. Show us magic, Bayaz, or show us the key. Logen swallowed. He didn't like the way that things were going, but then he didn't understand the rules of this game. He had put his trust in Bayaz for some reason, and there it would have to stay. It was a little late to be changing sides. Have you nothing left to say? Demanded Salt. He slowly lowered himself into his chair, smiling once more. His eyes slid over to the archways, and Logen felt the masked figures moving forward, straining to be released. Have you no more words? Have you no more tricks? Only one. Bayaz reached into his collar. He took hold of something there and drew it out a long, thin chain. One of the black masked figures stepped forward a pace, expecting a weapon, and Logen's hand gripped tighter on the handle of the knife. But when the chain came all the way out, there was only a rod of dark metal dangling on the end of it. The key, said Bayaz, holding it up to the candlelight. It barely shone at all. Less luster than the one in your play, perhaps, but the real thing, I assure you. Canedias never worked with gold. He did not like pretty things. He liked things that worked. The Arch Lector's lip curled. Do you simply expect us to take your word for it? Of course not. It is your job to be suspicious of everyone, and I must say you do it exceptionally well. It does grow rather late, however, so I will wait until tomorrow morning to open the house of the maker. Someone dropped a spoon on the floor and it clattered against the tiles. There will need to be some witnesses present, of course, to make sure that I don't try any sleight of hand. How about... Bayaz's cool green eyes swept down the table. Inquisitor Glokta. And you're a new fencing champion, Captain Luthar? The cripple frowned as he was named. Luthar looked utterly bewildered. The Arch Lector sat, his scorn swapped for a stony blankness. He gazed from Bayaz's smiling face to that gently swinging rod of dark metal, then back again. His eyes moved over to one of the doorways, and he gave a tiny shake of his head. The dark figures faded back into the shadows. Logen unclenched his aching teeth, then quietly slipped the knife back onto the table. Bayaz grinned. Dear me, Master Salt. You really are a hard man to please. I believe your eminence is the proper term of address, hissed the Arch Lector. So it is. I do declare. You really won't be happy until I've broken some furniture. I would hate to spill everyone's soup, though, so... With a sudden bang, the Arch Lector's chair collapsed. His hand shot out and grabbed at the tablecloth as he plunged to the floor in a clattering mess of loose firewood. and sprawled in the wreckage with a groan. The king started awake. His guests blinked and gasped and stared. Bayaz ignored them. "This really is an excellent soup," he said, slurping noisily from his spoon. Chapter 2. The House of the Maker. It was a stormy day, and the House of the Maker stood stark and grim, a huge dark shape against the ragged clouds. A cold wind whipped between the buildings and through the squares of the Agrient, making the tails of Glokta's black coat flap around him as he shuffled after Captain Luthar and the would-be Magus, the scarred Northman at his side. He knew they were watched the whole way, behind the windows, in the doorways, on the roofs. The practicals were everywhere. He could feel their eyes. Glokta had half expected, half hoped, that Bayaz and his companions would have disappeared in the night. But they had not. The bald old man seemed as relaxed as if he had undertaken to open a fruit cellar, and Glokta did not like it. When does the bluff end? When does he throw his hands up and admit it's all a game? When we reach the university? When we cross the bridge? When we stand before the very gate of the Maker's house and his key does not fit? But somewhere in the back of his mind the thought lurked. What if it does not end? What if the door opens? What if he truly is as he claims to be? Bayaz chattered to Luthar as they strolled across the empty courtyard towards the university. Every bit as much at ease as a grandfather with his favorite grandson, and every bit as boring. Of course, the city is so much larger than when I last visited. That district you call the Three Farms, all teeming bustle and activity. I remember when that whole borough was 3 farms. Indeed I do, and far beyond the city walls. Said Luthar. And as for the Spice's new guild hall, I never saw such ostentation. Glokta's mind raced as he limped after the two of them, trawling for hidden meanings in the sea of blather, grasping for order in the chaos. The questions tumbled over each other. Why pick me as a witness? Why not the Arch Lector himself? Does this Bayaz suppose that I can be easily fooled? And why Luthar? And how did he win? Is he a part of this deception? But if Luthar was party to some sinister plan, he was giving no sign. Glokta had never seen the slightest hint that he was anything other than the self-obsessed young fool he appeared to be. And then we come to this puzzle. Glokta glanced sidelong at the big Northman. There were no signs of deadly intent on his scarred face, little sign that anything was going on in there at all. Is he very stupid or very clever? Is he to be ignored or feared? Is he the servant or the master? There were no answers to any of it. Yet, well, this place is a shadow of its former self, said Bayaz as they halted outside the door to the university, raising an eyebrow at the grimy, tilting statues. He rapped briskly on the weathered wood, and the door swayed on its hinges. To Glokta's surprise, it opened almost immediately. "You're expected," croaked the ancient porter. They stepped around him into the gloom. "I will show you to," began the old man as he wrestled the creaking door shut. "No need," called Bayaz over his shoulder, already striding briskly off down the dusty corridor. "I know the way. Striding briskly off down the dusty corridor. I know the way." Glokta struggled to keep up, sweating despite the cold weather, leg burning all the way. The effort of maintaining the pace scarcely gave him time to consider how the bald bastard might be so familiar with the building. But familiar he certainly is. He swept down the corridors as though he had spent every day of his life there, clicking his tongue in disgust at the state of the place, and prattling all the while. "Nully, I've never seen such dust, Captain Luthar? I wouldn't be surprised if the damn place hadn't been cleaned since I was last here. I have no idea how a man can think under such conditions. No idea at all." Centuries of dead and justly forgotten adepti stared gloomily down from their canvases, as though upset by all the noise. The corridors of the university rolled past, an ancient, dusty, forsaken-seeming place, with nothing in it but grimy old paintings and musty old books. Jezal had precious little use for books. He had read a few about fencing and riding, a couple about famous military campaigns, once opened the covers on a great big history of the Union he found in his father's study, and got bored after 3 or 4 pages. Bayaz droned on. "Here we fought with the Maker's servants. I remember it well. They cried out to Canidius to save them, but he would not come down. These halls ran with blood, rang with screams, rolled with smoke that day. Jezal had no idea why the old fool would single him out to tell his tall stories to, and still less how to reply. "That sounds violent," Bayaz nodded. "It was. I am not proud of it, but good men must sometimes do violent things." Said the Northman suddenly. Jezal had not been aware that he was even listening. Besides, that was a different age. A violent age. Only in the old empire were people advanced beyond the primitive. Midderland, the heart of the Union, believe it or not, was a sty. A wasteland of warring barbaric tribes. The luckiest among them were taken into the Maker's service. The rest were painted-faced savages without writing, without science, with barely anything to separate them from the beasts. Jezal glanced furtively up at Ninefingers. It was not at all difficult to picture a barbaric state with that big brute beside him, but it was ridiculous to suppose that his beautiful home had once been a wasteland, that he was descended from primitives. This bald old man was a blathering liar, or a madman, but some important people seemed to take him seriously, and Jezal thought it best always to do what the important people said. Logen followed the others into a broken-down courtyard, bounded on 3 sides by the crumbling buildings of the university, on the 4th by the inner face of the sheer wall of the Agrient. All was covered in old moss, thick ivy, dry brambles. A man sat on a rickety chair among the weeds, watching them come closer. "I've been expecting you," he said, pushing himself up with some difficulty. "Damn knees, I'm not what I used to be." An unremarkable man past middle age, in a threadbare shirt with stains down the front. Bayaz frowned at him. "You are the chief warden?" "I am." "And where are the rest of your company?" "My wife is getting the breakfast ready, but not counting her, well, I am the whole company." "It's eggs," he said happily, patting his stomach. "What, for breakfast?" "I like eggs." "Good for you," muttered Bayaz, looking slightly put out. In King Casimir's reign, the bravest 50 men of the king's own were appointed wardens of the house. To guard this gate, there was considered to be no higher honor. "That was a long time ago," said the one and only warden, plucking at his dirty shirt. "There were 9 of us when I was a lad, but they went on to other things, or died, and were never replaced. Don't know who'll take over when I'm gone. There haven't been too many applicants. You surprise me." Bayaz cleared his throat. "Oh, Chief Warden." "I, Bayaz, first of the Magi, seek your leave to pass up the stair to the 5th gate, beyond the 5th gate, and onto the bridge, across the bridge and to the door of the Maker's house." The Chief Warden squinted back. "You sure?" Bayaz was growing impatient. "Yes. Why? I remember the last fellow who tried it, way back when I was a lad. Some big man, I reckon, some thinker. He went up those steps with 10 strong workmen, chisels and hammers and picks and what have you, telling us how he was going to open up the house, bring out its treasures and all. 5 minutes, and they were back, saying nothing, looking like they saw the dead walk." "Without doubt a daunting story," said Bayaz. "But we're going? Your business, I suppose." And the old man turned and slouched across the miserable courtyard. Up a narrow stair they went, the steps worn down in the middle, up to a tunnel through the high wall of the Agrient, onto a narrow gate in the darkness. Logen felt an odd sense of worry as the bolt slid back. He shrugged his shoulders, trying to get rid of it, and the warden grinned at him. "You can feel it already, eh? Feel what? The Maker's breath, they call it." He gave the doors the gentlest shove. They swung open together, light spilling through into the darkness. The Maker's breath. Glokta tottered across the bridge, teeth clenched tight on gums, painfully aware of the volume of empty air beneath his feet. It was a single, delicate arch, leaping from high up on the wall of the Agrient to the gate of the Maker's house. He had often admired it from down in the city, on the other side of the lake, wondering how it had stayed up all these years. A spectacular, remarkable, beautiful thing. It does not seem so beautiful now. Not much wider than a man lying down, too narrow by far for comfort, and with a terrifying drop to the water below. Worse still, it had no parapet, not so much as a wooden handrail, and the breeze is rather fresh today. Luthar and Ninefingers seemed worried enough by it, and they have the free and painless use of both their legs. Only Bayaz made the long trip across without apparent worry, as confident as if his feet were on a country lane, They walked always in the vast shadow of the house of the Maker, of course. The closer they came, the more massive it seemed, its lowest parapet far higher than the wall of the Agriant. A stark black mountain, rising sheer from the lake below, blotting out the sun. A thing from a different age, built on a different scale. Glokta glanced back towards the gate behind him. Did he catch a glimpse of something between the battlements on the wall above? A practical watching? They would see the old man fail to open the door. They would be waiting to take him on their way back through. But until then, I am helpless. It was not a comforting thought. And Glokta was in need of comfort. As he tottered further across the bridge, a niggling fear swelled inside him. It was more than the height, more than the strange company, more than the great tower looming above. A base fear without reason, the animal terror of a nightmare. With every shuffling step, the feeling grew. He could see the door now, a square of dark metal set back into the smooth stones of the tower. A circle of letters was etched into the center of it. For some reason they made Glokta want to vomit, but he dragged himself closer. 2 circles, large letters and small letters, a spidery script he did not recognize. His guts churned. Many circles, letters and lines, too detailed to take in. They swam before his stinging, weeping eyes. Glokta could go no further. He stood there, leaning on his cane, fighting with every ounce of will against the need to fall to his knees, turn and crawl away. Ninefingers was faring little better, breathing hard through his nose, a look of the most profound horror and disgust on his face. Luthar was in considerably worse shape, teeth gritted, white-faced and palsied. He dropped slowly down on one knee, gasping, as Glokta edged past him. Bayaz did not seem afraid. He stepped right up to the door and ran his fingers over the larger symbols. 11 wards, and 11 wards reversed. He traced the circle of smaller characters, and 11 times 11. His finger followed the fine line outside them. Can it be that line is made of tiny letters too? Who can say how many hundreds here? Truly, a most potent enchantment. The sense of awe was only slightly diminished by the sound of Luthar puking noisily over the side of the bridge. "What does it say?" croaked Glokta, swallowing some bile of his own. The old man grinned at him. "Can you not feel it, Inquisitor? It says, turn away. It says, get you gone. It says, none shall pass. But the message is not for us." He reached into his collar and pulled out the rod of metal, the same dark metal as the door itself. "We shouldn't be here," growled Ninefingers from behind. "This place is dead. We should go." But Bayaz did not seem to hear. "The magic has leaked out of the world," Glokta heard him murmuring, "and all the achievements of Juvens lie in ruins." He weighed the key in his hand, brought it slowly upwards. But the Maker's work stands strong as ever. Time has not diminished them, nor ever will. There did not even seem to be a hole. But the key slid slowly into the door, slowly, slowly, into the very center of the circles. Glokta held his breath. Click, and nothing happened. The door did not open. That is all then. The game is over. He felt a surge of relief as he turned back towards the Agriant, raising a hand to signal to the practicals on the wall above. "I need not go further. I need not." Then an answering echo came from deep within. Click. Glokta felt his face twitch in sympathy with the sound. Did I imagine it? He hoped so with all his being. Click. Again. No mistake. And now, before his disbelieving eyes, the circles in the door began to turn. Glokta took a stunned step back, his cane scraping on the stones of the bridge. Click, click. There had been no sign that the metal was not all one piece, no cracks, no grooves, no mechanism, and yet the circles span, each at a different speed. Click, click, click. Faster now and faster. Glokta felt dizzy. The innermost ring, with the largest letters, was still crawling. The outermost, the thinnest one, was flying around too fast for his eyes to follow. Click, 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 click. Shapes formed in the markings as the symbols passed each other. Lines, squares, triangles, unimaginably intricate, dancing before his eyes, then vanishing as the wheels spun on. Click! And the circles were still, arranged in a new pattern. Bayaz reached up and pulled the key from the door. There was a soft hissing, barely audible, as of water far away, and a long crack appeared in the door. The two halves moved slowly, smoothly away from each other. The space between them grew steadily larger. Click. They slid into the walls, flush with the sides of the square archway. The door stood open. "Now that," said Bayaz softly, "is craftsmanship. No fetid wind spilled out, no stench of rot or decay, no sign of long years past, only a waft of cool, dry air. And yet the feeling is of opening a coffin." Silence, but for the wind fumbling across the dark stones, the breath sighing in Glokta's dry throat, the distant lapping of the water far below. The unearthly terror was gone. He felt only a deep worry as he stared into the open archway. "But no worse than when I wait outside the Arch Lector's office." Bayaz turned round, smiling. "Long years have passed since I sealed this place, and in all that slow time no man has crossed the threshold. You three are truly honored." Glokta did not feel honored. He felt ill. "There are dangers within. Touch nothing, and go only where I lead you. Follow close behind me, for the ways are not always the same." "Not the same?" asked Glokta. "How can that be?" The old man shrugged. "I'm only the doorman," he said as he slipped the key and its chain back inside his shirt. "Not the architect." And he stepped into the shadows. Jezal did not feel well. Not well at all. It was not simply the vile nausea that the letters on the doors had somehow created. It was more. A lurch of sudden shock and disgust, like picking up a cup and drinking, expecting water, and finding something else inside. Piss, perhaps, in this case. That same wave of ugly surprise, but stretching out over minutes, over hours. Things that he had dismissed as foolishness or old stories were suddenly revealed as facts before his eyes. The world was a different place than it had been the day before. A weird and unsettling place, and he had infinitely preferred it the way it was. He could not understand why he had to be here. Jezal knew precious little about history, Canidias, Juvens, Beas even. They were names from dusty books, heard as a child and holding no interest even then. It was just bad luck was all. He had won the contest, and here he was, wandering about in some strange old tower. That was all it was, a strange old tower. "Welcome," said Bayaz, "to the house of the Maker." Jezal looked up from the floor and his jaws sagged open. The word house did little to describe the vastness of the dim space in which he found himself. The Lord's round itself could have fitted comfortably inside it, the entire building, with room to spare. The walls were made from rough stones, unfinished, unmortared, piled haphazardly, but rising endlessly upward. Above the center of the room, far above, something was suspended. A huge, fascinating something. It put Jezal in mind of a navigator's instruments, rendered on an enormous scale. A system of gigantic metal rings, shining in the dim light, one about the other, with further, smaller rings running between them, inside them, around them. Hundreds of them, perhaps all told, scored with markings. Writing maybe, or meaningless scratches. A large black bowl hung in the center. Bayaz was already walking out into the vast circle of the floor, covered in intricate lines, set into the dark stone and bright metal, his footfalls echoing high above. Jezal crept after him. There was something frightening, something dizzying, about moving across a space so huge. "This is Midderland," said Bayaz. "What?" The old man pointed down. The squiggly lines of metal began to take on meaning. Coastlines, mountains, rivers, the land and the sea. The shape of Midderland, clear in Jezal's mind, from 100 maps, was laid out beneath his feet. "The whole circle of the world," Bayaz gestured across the endless floor. "That way is England, and beyond, the north. Gurkul is over there. There is Starikland and the old empire, and over here the city-states of Styria, beyond them Seljuk and distant Thond." Canidias observed that the lands of the known world form a circle, with its center here, at his house, and its outer edge passing through the island of Shabulian, far to the west, beyond the old empire. "The edge of the world," muttered the Northman, nodding slowly to himself. "Some arrogance," snorted Glokta. To think of your home as the center of everything, ha! Bayaz looked about him at the vastness of the chamber. The Maker was never short on arrogance, nor were his brothers. Jezal stared up gormlessly. The room was even higher than it was wide, its ceiling, if there was one, lost in shadow. An iron rail ran round the rough stone walls, a gallery perhaps 20 strides above. Beyond it, higher still, there was another, and another, and another, vague in the half-light. Over all hung the strange device. He gave a sudden start. It was moving. It was all moving. Slowly, smoothly, silently, the rings shifted, turned, revolved one about the other. He could not imagine how it was driven. Somehow, the key turning in the lock must have set it off. Or could it have been turning all these years? He felt dizzy. The whole mechanism now seemed to be spinning, revolving, faster and faster. The galleries, too, shifting in opposite directions. Staring straight upwards was not helping with his sense of disorientation, and he fixed his aching eyes on the floor, on the map of Midderland beneath his feet. He gasped. That was even worse. Now the whole floor seemed to be turning. The entire chamber was revolving around him. The archways leading out were all identical, a dozen of them or more. He could not guess now through which one they had entered. He felt a wave of horrible panic. Only that distant black orb in the center of the device was still. He fixed his watering eyes desperately on that, forced himself to breathe slow. The feeling faded. The vast hall was still again, almost. The rings were still shifting, almost imperceptibly, inching ever onwards. He swallowed a mouthful of spit, hunched his shoulders, and hurried after the others with his head down. "Not that way," roared Bayaz suddenly, his voice exploding in the thick silence, ripping out and bouncing back, echoing 1,000 times around the cavernous space. "Not that way! Not that way!" Jezal jumped backwards. The archway and the dim hall beyond looked identical to the one down which the others had been walking, but he saw now that they were off to his right. He had got turned around somehow. "Go only where I go," I said, hissed the old man. "Not that way. Not that way." "I'm sorry," stammered Jezal, his voice sounding pitifully small in the vast space. I thought, "It all looks the same." Bayaz placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder and drew him smoothly away. "I did not mean to scare you, my friend, but it would be a great shame if one so promising were taken from us quite so young." Jezal swallowed and stared into the shadowy hallway, wondering what might have awaited him down there. His mind provided any number of unpleasant possibilities. The echoes still whispered at him as he turned away. "Not that way. Not that way. Not that way." Logen hated this place. The stones were cold and dead. The air was still and dead. Even the sounds they made as they moved fell muffled and lifeless. It wasn't cold, and it wasn't hot, and yet his back trickled with sweat. His neck prickled with aimless fear. He'd jerk around every few steps, stung by the sudden feeling he was being watched. But there was never anyone behind him. Only the boy Luthar and the crippled Glokta, looking every bit as worried and confused as he was. "We chased him through these very halls," murmured Bayaz quietly. 11 of us, all the Magi, together for the last time. All but Kalul, Zacharias and Cornel. They fought with the Maker here, and each was bested. They were fortunate to escape with their lives, and Selmy and Broken Tooth had worse luck. Canidius was the death of them. 2 good friends, 2 brothers I lost that day. They edged round a narrow balcony, lit by a pale curtain of light. On one side sheer stones rose smooth. On the other they dropped away and were lost in the darkness. A black pit full of shadows, with no far side, no top, no bottom. Despite the vastness of the space, there were no echoes. No air moved. No air moved. There was not the tiniest breeze. The air was stale and close as a tomb. "There should be water down there, surely," muttered Glokta, frowning over the rail. "There should be something, shouldn't there?" He squinted up. "Where's the ceiling?" "This place stinks," whined Luthar, one hand clasped over his nose. Logen agreed with him, for once. It was a smell he knew well, and his lips curled back with hatred at it. "Smells like fucking flatheads." "Smells like fucking flatheads." "Oh yes," said Bayaz. "The Shanka are the Maker's work also?" "His work?" "Indeed. He took clay and metal. and leftover flesh, and he made them. Logen stared. He made them. To fight in his war. Against us. Against the Magi. Against his brother Juvens. He bred the first Shanka here and let them loose upon the world to grow. And breed. And destroy. That was their purpose. For many years after Canidia's death, we hunted them, but we could not catch them all. We drove them into the darkest corners of the world. And there they have grown and bred again, and now come forth to grow, and breed, and destroy, as they were always meant to do. Logen gawped at him. Shanka. Luthar chuckled and shook his head. Flatheads were no laughing matter. Logen turned suddenly, blocking the narrow balcony with his body, looming over Luthar in the half-light. Something funny? Well, I mean, everyone knows there's no such thing. I've fought them with my own hands, growled Logen. All my life. They killed my wife, my children, my friends. The north is swarming with fucking flatheads. He leaned down. Luthar had turned pale. He looked to Glokta for support, but the Inquisitor had sagged against the wall, rubbing at his leg, thin lips tight shut, hollow face beaded with sweat. I don't care a shit either way, he snapped. There's plenty of Shanka in the world, hissed Logen, sticking his face right up close to Luthar's. Maybe one day you'll meet some. He turned and stalked off after Bayaz, already disappearing through an archway at the far end of the balcony. He had no wish to be left behind in this place. Yet another hall, an enormous one, lined with a silent forest of columns on either side, peopled with a multitude of shadows, light cut down in shafts from far above, etching strange patterns into the stone floor, shapes of light and dark, lines of black and white, almost like writing. Is there a message here? For me? Glokta was trembling. If I looked, just for a moment longer, perhaps I could understand. Luthar wandered past. His shadow fell across the floor. The lines were broken. The feeling was gone. Glokta shook himself. I am losing my reason in this cursed place. I must think clearly. Just the facts, Glokta. Only the facts. Where does the light come from? He asked. Bayaz waved his hand. Above, there are windows, perhaps. Glokta's cane tapped into the light, tapped into the dark, his left boot dragged along behind. Is there nothing but hallway? What's the point of it all? Who can know the Maker's mind? Intoned Bayaz pompously, or fathom his great design? He seemed almost to take pride in never giving straight answers. The whole place was a colossal waste of effort as far as Glokta could see. How many lived here? Long years ago, in happier times, many hundreds, all manner of people who served Canidius and helped him in his works. But the Maker was ever distrustful and jealous of his secrets. Bit by bit he turned his followers out, into the Agrient, the university. Towards the end, only 3 lived here, Canidius himself, his assistant Jeremias. Bayaz paused for a moment. And his daughter Ptolemy, the Maker's daughter? What of it? Snapped the old man. Nothing at all. And yet, the veneer slipped then, if only for an instant. It is strange that he knows the ways of this place so well. When did you live here? Bayaz frowned deep. There is such a thing as too many questions. Glokta watched him walk away. Sult was wrong. The Arch Lector, fallible after all. He underestimated this Bayaz, and it cost him. Who is this bold, irritable fool, who can make a sprawling idiot of the most powerful man in the Union? Standing here, deep within the bowels of this unearthly place, the answer did not seem so strange. The first of the Magi? This is it. What? Asked Logen. The hallway stretched out in either direction, curving gently, disappearing into the darkness, walls of huge stone blocks, unbroken on either side. Bayaz did not answer. He was running his hands gently over the stones, looking for something. Yes, this is it. Bayaz pulled the key out from his shirt. You might want to prepare yourselves. For what? The Magus slid the key into an unseen hole. One of the blocks that made up the wall suddenly vanished, flying up into the ceiling with a thunderous crash. Logen reeled, shaking his head. He saw Luthar bent forward, hands clamped over his ears. The whole corridor seemed to hum with crashing echoes on and on. Wait, said Bayaz, though Logen could barely hear him over the ringing in his head. Touch nothing. Go nowhere. He stepped through the opening, leaving the key lodged in the wall. Logen peered after him. A glimmer of light shone down a narrow passageway. A rushing sound washed through like the trickling of a stream. Logen felt a strange curiosity picking at him. He glanced back at the other two. Perhaps Bayaz had meant only for them to stay. He ducked through the doorway and squinted up at a bright round chamber. Light flooded in from high above, piercing light, almost painful to look at after the gloom of all the rest. The curving walls were perfect, clean white stone, running with trickling water, flowing down all around and collecting in a round pool below. The air was cool, damp on Logen's skin. A narrow bridge sprang out from the passage, steps leading upwards, ending at a tall white pillar, rising from the water. Bayaz was standing there, on top of it, staring down at something. Logen crept up behind the magus, breathing shallow. A block of white stone stood there. Water dripped onto its smooth, hard center from above. A regular tap, 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 always in the same spot. Two things lay in the thin layer of wet. The first was a square box, simply made from dark metal, big enough to hold a man's head, maybe. The other was altogether stranger. A weapon, perhaps, like an axe. A long shaft, made from tiny metal tubes, all twisted about each other like the stems of old vines. At one end, there was a scored grip. At the other, there was a flat piece of metal, pierced with small holes, a long, thin hook curving out from it. The light played over its many dark surfaces, glittering with beads of moisture. Strange, beautiful, fascinating. On the grip one letter glinted, silver in the dark metal. Logen recognized it from his sword. The mark of Canidius, the work of the master maker. "What is this?" he asked, reaching out for it. "Don't touch it!" screamed Bayaz, slapping Logen's hand away. "Did I not tell you to wait?" Logen took an uncertain step back. He had never seen the magus look so worried, but he couldn't keep his eyes off the strange thing on the slab. "Is it a weapon?" Bayaz breathed a long, slow breath. "A most terrible one, my friend. A weapon against which no steel, no stone, no magic can protect you. Do not even tread near it, I warn you. There are dangers, the divider, Canidius called it, and with it he killed his brother Juvens, my master. He once told me it has two edges, one here, one on the other side." "What the hell does that mean?" muttered Logen. "He couldn't even see one edge you could cut with." Bayaz shrugged. "If I knew that, I suppose that I'd be the master maker, instead of merely the first of the magi." He reached forward and lifted the box, wincing as though it was a great weight. "Could you help me with this?" Logen hooked his hands under it and gasped. It could hardly have weighed more if it was a block of solid iron. "Heavy," he grunted. "Canidius forged it to be strong as all his great skill could make it, not to keep its contents safe from the world." He leaned close and spoke softly. "To keep the world safe from its contents." Logen frowned down. "What's in it? Nothing," muttered Bayaz. Yet, Jezal was trying to think of three men in the world he hated more. Brent, he was simply a swollen-headed idiot. Gorst, he had merely done his meager best to beat Jezal in a fencing match. Varus, he was just a pompous old ass. No, these three were at the top of his list. The arrogant old man with his idiotic prattle and his self-important air of mystery. The hulking savage with his ugly scars and his menacing frown, the patronizing cripple with his smug little comments and his pretensions of knowing all about life. The three of them, combined with the stagnant air and perpetual gloom of this horrible place, were almost enough to make Jezal puke again. The only thing he could imagine worse than his present company was no company at all. He looked into the shadows all around and shuddered at the thought. Still, his spirits rose as they turned a corner. There was a small square of daylight up ahead. He hurried towards it, overtaking Glokta as he shambled along on his cane, mouth watering with anticipation at the thought of being back out under the sky. Jezal closed his eyes with pleasure as he stepped into the open air. The cold wind stroked his face, and he gasped in great lungfuls of it. The relief was terrific, as though he had been trapped down there in the darkness for weeks, as though fingers clamped around his throat had just now been released. He walked forward across a wide open space, paved with stark, flat stones. Ninefingers and Bayaz stood side by side up ahead, behind a parapet, waist high, and beyond them. The Agriant came into view below, a patchwork of white walls, gray roofs, glinting windows, green gardens. They were nowhere near the summit of the maker's house, only on one of the lowest roofs, above the gate, but still terrifyingly high. Jezal recognized the crumbling university, the shining dome of the Lord's Round, the squat mass of the House of Questions. He could see the square of marshals, a bowl of wooden seating in amongst the buildings, perhaps even the tiny yellow flash of the fencing circle in its center. Beyond the citadel, surrounded by its white wall and twinkling moat, the city was a sprawling gray mass under the dirty gray sky, stretching all the way to the sea. Jezal laughed with disbelief and delight. The Tower of Chains was a step ladder compared to this. He was so high above the world that all seemed somehow still, frozen in time. He felt like a king. No man had seen this, not for hundreds of years. He was huge, grand, far more important than the tiny people that must live and work in the little buildings down there. He turned to look at Glokta, but the cripple was not smiling. He was even paler than ever, frowning at the toy city, his left eye twitching with worry. "Scared of heights?" laughed Jezal. Glokta turned his ashen face toward him. "We climbed no steps to get here." Jezal's grin began to fade. "No steps, do you understand? How could it be? How? Tell me that." Jezal swallowed as he thought over the way they had come. The cripple was right. No steps, no ramps. They had gone neither up nor down. Yet here they were, far above the tallest tower of the Agrient. He felt sick again. The view now seemed dizzying, disgusting, obscene. He backed unsteadily away from the parapet. He wanted to go home. I followed him through the darkness alone, and here I faced him, Canidius, the master maker. Here we fought, fire and steel and flesh. Here we stood. He threw Ptolemy from the roof before my eyes. I saw it happen, but I could not stop him. His own daughter, can you imagine? No one could have deserved that less than she. There never was a more innocent spirit. Logen frowned. He hardly knew what to say to this. "Here we struggled," muttered Bias, his meaty fists clenched tight on the bare parapet. "I tore at him, with fire and steel and flesh, and he at me. I cast him down. He fell burning, and broke upon the bridge below. And so the last of the sons of Uz passed from the world, so many of their secrets lost forever. They destroyed each other, all four of them. What a waste." Bias turned to look at Logen. "But that was a long time ago, eh, my friend? Long ago, my friend." He puffed out his cheeks and hunched his shoulders. "Let us leave this place. It feels like a tomb. It is a tomb. Let us seal it up once more and the memories with it. That is all in the past." "Huh?" said Logen. "My father used to say the seeds of the past bear fruit in the present, so they do." Bias reached out slowly, and his fingers brushed against the cold, dark metal of the box in Logen's hands. "They do. Your father was a wise man." Glokta's leg was burning. His twisted spine was a river of fire from his arse to his skull. His mouth was dry as sawdust, his face sweaty and twitching, the breath hissing in his nose, but he pressed on through the darkness, away from the vast hall with its black orb and its strange contraption, on towards the open door. He stood there with his head tipped back, on the narrow bridge before the narrow gateway, his hand trembling on the handle of his cane, blinking and rubbing his eyes, gasping in the free air, and feeling the cool breeze on his face. Who would have thought that wind could feel so fine? Maybe it's just as well there weren't any steps. I might never have made it out. Luthar was already halfway back across the bridge, hurrying as though he had a devil astride behind. Ninefingers was not far away, breathing hard and muttering something in Northern over and over. Still alive, Glokta thought it might be. His big hands were clenched tight around that square metal box, tendons standing out as though it weighed as much as an anvil. There was more to this trip than just proving a point. What is it that they brought out from there? What weighs so heavily? He glanced back into the darkness and shivered. He was not sure he even wanted to know. Bias strolled out of the tunnel and into the open air, looking smug as ever. "So, Inquisitor," he said breezily, "how did you find your trip into the House of the Maker? A twisted, strange, and horrible nightmare. I might even have preferred to return to the Emperor's prisons for a few hours." "Something to do of a morning," he snapped. "I'm so glad you found it diverting," chuckled Bias, as he pulled the rod of dark metal out from his shirt. "And tell me, do you still believe that I'm a liar? Or have your suspicions finally been laid to rest? Glokta frowned at the key. He frowned at the old man. He frowned into the crushing darkness of the Maker's house. My suspicions grow with every passing moment. They are never laid to rest. They only change shape. Honestly, I don't know what to believe. Good. Knowing your own ignorance is the first step to enlightenment. Between you and me, though, I'd think of something else to tell the Arch Lector. Glokta felt his eyelid flickering. You'd better start across, Inquisitor, while I lock up. The plunge to the cold water below no longer seemed to hold much fear. If I were to fall, at least I would die in the light. Glokta looked back only once, as he heard the doors of the Maker's house shut with a soft click, the circles slide back into place. All as it was before we arrived. He turned his prickling back, sucked his gums against the familiar waves of nausea, and cursed and struggled his limping way across the bridge. Luthar was hammering desperately on the old gates at the far end. "Let us in!" He was nearly sobbing as Glokta hobbled up, an edge of cracked panic to his voice. "Let us in!" The door finally wobbled open to reveal a shocked-looking warden. Such a shame. I was sure that Captain Luthar was about to burst into tears. The proud winner of the contest, the Union's bravest young son, the very flower of manhood, blubbing on his knees. That sight could almost have made the trip worthwhile. Luthar darted through the open gate, and Ninefingers followed grimly after, cradling the metal box in his arms. The warden squinted at Glokta as he limped up to the gate. "Back so soon? You old dolt! What the hell are you talking about so soon? I'm only halfway through my eggs. You've been gone less than half an hour." Glokta barked a joyless laugh. Half a day, perhaps, but he frowned as he peered past into the courtyard. The shadows were almost exactly where they had been when they left. Early morning still, but how? The Maker once told me that time is all in the mind. Glokta winced as he turned his head. Bayaz had come up behind him and was tapping the side of his bald skull with a thick finger. "It could be worse, believe me. It's when you come out before you went in that you really start to worry." He smiled, eyes glinting in the light through the doorway. "Playing the fool? Or trying to make a fool of me? Either way, these games grow tiresome." "Enough riddles," sneered Glokta. "Why not just tell me what you're after?" The first of the Magi, if such he was, grinned still wider. "I like you, Inquisitor, I really do. I wouldn't be surprised if you were the only honest man left in this whole damn country. We should have a talk at some point, you and I. A talk about what I want, and about what you want." His smile vanished. "But not today." And he stepped through the open door, leaving Glokta behind in the shadows. Chapter 3. Nobody's Dog. "Why me?" West murmured to himself through gritted teeth, staring across the bridge towards the south gate. That nonsense at the docks had taken him longer than expected, much longer. But then, didn't everything these days? It sometimes felt as if he was the only man in the Union seriously preparing for a war, and had to organize the entire business on his own, right down to counting the nails that would hold the horses' shoes on. He was already late for his daily meeting with Marshal Burr, and knew there would be 100 impossible things for him to get done today. There always were. To become involved in some pointless hold-up here, at the very gate of the Agrient, was all he needed. Why the hell must it be me? His head was starting to hurt again. That all-too-familiar pulsing behind the eyes. Each day it seemed to come on earlier, and end up worse. Because of the heat over the last few days, the guards had been permitted to come to duty without full armor. West reckoned that at least 2 of them were now regretting it. One was folded up on the ground near the gate, hands clasped between his legs, whimpering noisily. His sergeant stood stooped over next to him, blood running from his nose and pattering dark red drops on the stones of the bridge. The 2 other soldiers in the detail had their spears lowered, blades pointing towards a scrawny, dark-skinned youth. Another southerner stood nearby, an old man with long gray hair, leaning against the handrail and watching the scene with an expression of profound resignation. The youth glanced quickly over his shoulder, and West felt a sting of surprise. A woman. Black hair hacked off short and sticking off her head in a mess of greasy spikes. One sleeve was torn off round her shoulder, and a long, sinewy brown arm stuck out, ending in a fist bunched tight around the grip of a curved knife. The blade shone, mirror bright and evilly sharp, the one and only thing about her that looked clean. There was a thin gray scar all the way down the right side of her face, through her black eyebrow and across her scowling lips. It was her eyes, though, which truly caught West off guard. Slightly slanted, narrowed with the deepest hostility and suspicion, and yellow. He had seen all kinds of Kantiks in his time, while he was fighting in Gurkhul, in the war, but he never saw eyes like that before. Deep, rich, golden yellow, like piss. That was the smell as he came closer. Piss and dirt, and a lot of old sour sweat. He remembered that from the war, all right, the stink of men who had not washed in a very long time. West fought the compulsion to wrinkle up his nose and breathe through his mouth as he approached, and the urge to circle out wide and keep his distance from that glittering blade. You have to show no fear if you're to calm a dangerous situation, however much you might be feeling. In his experience, if you could seem to be in control, you were more than halfway to being there. "What the hell is going on here?" he growled at the bloody-faced sergeant. He had no need at all to feign annoyance. He was getting later and angrier by the second. "These stinking beggars wanted to come into the Agrient, sir. I tried to turn them away, of course, but they have letters." Letters. The strange old man tapped West on the shoulder, handed over a folded sheet of paper, slightly grubby round the edges. He read it, his frown growing steadily deeper. "This is a letter of transit signed by Lord Hoff himself. They must be admitted, but not armed, sir. I said they couldn't go in armed." The sergeant held up an odd-looking bough of dark wood in one hand, and a curved sword of the Gurkish design in the other. It was enough of a struggle getting her to give these up, but when I tried to search her, "This Gurkish bitch," the woman hissed and took a quick step forward, and the sergeant and his two guards shuffled nervously back in a tight group. "Peace, Pharaoh," sighed the old man in the Kantik tongue. "For God's sake, peace." The woman spat on the stones of the bridge and hissed some curse that West could not understand, weaving the blade back and forth in a way that suggested she knew how to use it and was more than willing. "Why me?" West mumbled under his breath. It was plain he was going nowhere until this difficulty was resolved. As if he didn't have enough to worry about. He took a deep breath and did his best to put himself in the position of the stinking woman, a stranger, surrounded by strange-looking people speaking words she didn't understand, brandishing spears and trying to search her. Probably she was even now thinking about how horrible West smelled, disorientated and afraid, most likely, rather than dangerous. She did look very dangerous, though, and not in the least afraid. The old man certainly seemed the more reasonable of the two. So West turned to him first. "Are you two from Gurkhul?" he asked him in broken Kantik. The old man turned his tired eyes on West. "No, there is more to the south than the Gurkish. Kadir, then. Taurish. You know the south? A little?" "I fought there in the war." The old man jerked his head at the woman, watching them suspiciously with her slanted yellow eyes. "She's from a place called Muntaz. I never heard of it." "Why would you have?" The old man shrugged his bony shoulders. "A small country by the sea, far to the east of Shafa, beyond the mountains. The Gurkish conquered it years ago, and its people were scattered or made slaves. Apparently she has been in a foul mood ever since." The woman scowled over at them, keeping one eye on the soldiers. "And you?" "Oh, I come from much further south, beyond Kanta, beyond the desert, even beyond the circle of the world. The land of my birth will not be on your maps, friend. Yu Wei is my name." He held out a long black hand. "Column West." "Column West." The woman watched them warily as they shook hands. "This one is called West Pharaoh. He fought against the Gurkish. Will that make you trust him?" Yu Wei didn't sound very hopeful, and indeed the woman's shoulders were still as hunched and bristling as ever, her grip on the knife no less tight. One of the soldiers chose that unfortunate moment to take a step forward, jabbing at the air with his spear, and the woman snarled and spat again, shouting more unintelligible curses. "That's enough!" West heard himself roaring at the guard. "Put your fucking spears up." They blinked at him, shocked, and he fought to bring his voice back under control. "I don't think this is a full-scale invasion, do you? Put them up." Reluctantly, the spear points drifted away from the woman. West stepped firmly towards her, keeping his eyes fixed on hers with all the authority he could muster. "Show no fear," he thought to himself, but his heart was thumping. He held out his open palm, almost close enough to touch her. "The knife," said West sharply in his bad Kantik. "You will not be harmed. You have my word." West stood there, mouth dry, head still thumping, getting later and later, sweating under his uniform in the hot sun, trying to ignore the woman's smell. Time passed. "God's teeth, Pharaoh," snapped the old man suddenly. "I'm old. Take pity on me. I may only have a few years left. Give the man the knife before I die." "SSS," she hissed, curling her lip. For a dizzy, stretched-out moment, the knife went up. Then the hilt slapped down into West's palm. He allowed himself a dry swallow of relief. Right up until the last moment he had been almost sure she would give him the sharp end. "Thank you," he said, a deal more calmly than he felt. He handed the knife to the sergeant. "Stow the weapons away and escort our guests into the agrient. And if any harm comes to anyone, especially her, I'll be holding you responsible. Understand?" He glowered at the sergeant for a moment, then stepped through the gate into the tunnel before anything else could go wrong, leaving the old man and the stinking woman behind him. His head was thumping harder even than before. Damn it, he was late. "Why the hell me?" he grumbled to himself. "I'm afraid the armories are closed for the day," sneered Major Valamir, staring down his nose at West as though at a beggar whining for small change. "Our quotas are fulfilled, ahead of schedule, and we will not be lighting the forges again this week. Perhaps if you had arrived on time." The pounding in West's head was growing worse than ever. He forced himself to breathe slowly and keep his voice calm and even. There was nothing to be gained by losing his temper. There was never anything to be gained by that. "I understand, Major," said West patiently, "but there is a war on. Many of the levies we have received are scarcely armed, and Lord Marshal Burr has asked that the forges be lit in order to provide equipment for them." This was not entirely true, but since joining the Marshal's staff, West had more or less given up on telling the whole truth to anyone. That was no way to get anything done. He now employed a mixture of wheedling, bluster, and outright lies, humble entreaties and veiled threats, and had become quite expert at judging which tactic would be most effective on what man. Unfortunately, he had yet to strike the right chord with Major Valamir, the master of the king's armories. Somehow, their being equal in rank made matters all the more difficult. He could not quite get away with bullying the man, but could not quite bring himself to beg. Furthermore, in terms of social standing, they were anything but equals. Valamir was old nobility, from a powerful family, and arrogant beyond belief. He made Jezal Dan Luthar seem a humble, selfless type, and his total lack of experience in the field only made matters worse. He behaved doubly like an ass in order to compensate. Instructions from West, though they might come from Marshal Burr himself, were as welcome as they would have been from a reeking swineherd. Today was no exception. "This month's quotas are fulfilled, Major West." Valamir managed to put a sneering emphasis into the name. "And so the forges are closed. That is all. And this is what you would have me tell the Lord Marshal. The arming of levies is the responsibility of those lords that provide them," he recited primly. "I cannot be blamed if they fall short on their obligations. It is simply not our problem, Major West, and you may tell that to the Lord Marshal. This was always the way of it, back and forth. From Burr's offices to the various commissary departments to the commanders of companies, of battalions, of regiments, to the stores scattered around the agrient and the city, to the armories, the barracks, the stables, to the docks, where the soldiers and their equipment would begin to embark in just a few short days, to other departments, and back to where he began, with miles walked and nothing done. Each night he would drop into bed like a stone, only to start up a few hours later with it all to do again. As commander of a battalion, his trade had been to fight the enemy with steel. As a staff officer, it seemed, his role was to fight his own side with paper, more secretary than soldier. He felt like a man trying to push a huge stone up a hill, straining and straining, getting nowhere, but unable to stop pushing in case the rock should fall and crush him. Meanwhile, arrogant bastards who were in just the same danger lazed on the slopes beside him saying, "Well, it's not my rock." He understood now why, during the war in Gurkul, there had sometimes not been enough food for the men to eat, or clothes for them to wear, or wagons to draw the supplies with, or horses to draw the wagons, or all manner of other things that were deeply necessary and easily anticipated. West would be damned before that happened because of some oversight of his. And he would certainly be damned if he would see men die for want of a weapon to fight with. He tried yet again to calm himself, but each time his head hurt more, and his voice was cracking with the effort. "Why, and what if we find ourselves mired in England with a crowd of half-clothed, unarmed peasants to provide for? What then, Major Valimir? Whose problem will it be? Not yours, I dare say. You'll still be here, with your cold forges for company." West knew as soon as he said it that he had gone too far. The man positively bristled. "How dare you, sir? Are you questioning my personal honor? My family goes back 9 generations in the king's own." West rubbed his eyes, not knowing whether he wanted to laugh or cry. "I have no doubts as to your courage, I assure you. That was not my meaning at all." He tried to put himself in Valimir's position. He did not really know the pressures the man was under. Probably he would rather be in command of soldiers than smiths, probably. It was no use. The man was a shit, and West hated him. "This is not a question of your honor, Major, or that of your family. This is a question of our being fit for war." Valimir's eyes had turned deadly cold. "Just who do you think you're talking to? You dirty commoner? All the influence you have you owe to Burr, and who is he but an oaf from the provinces, risen to his rank by fortune alone?" West blinked. He guessed what they said about him behind his back, of course. But it was another thing to hear it to his face. "And when Burr is gone, what will become of you, eh? Where will you be without him to hide behind? You've no blood, no family." Valimir's lips twisted in a cold sneer. "Apart from that sister of yours, of course. And from what I hear, West found himself moving forward fast." "What?" he snarled. "What was that?" His expression must have been dire indeed. He saw the color draining from Valimir's face. You think I need Burr to fight my battles, you fucking gutless worm." Before he knew it, he had moved again, and Valimir stumbled back towards the wall, flinching sideways and raising one arm as if to ward off an expected blow. It was the most West could do to stop his hands from grabbing hold of the little bastard and shaking him until his head came off. His own skull was throbbing, pounding. He felt as though the pressure would pop his eyes right out of his head. He dragged in long, slow breaths through his nose, clenched his fists until they hurt. The anger slowly subsided back below the point where it threatened to take sudden control of his body. It only pulsed now, squeezing at his chest. "If you have something to say on the subject of my sister," he whispered softly, "then you can say it. Say it now." He let his left hand drop slowly to sit on the hilt of his sword, "and we can settle this outside the city walls." Major Valimir shrank back still further. "I heard nothing," he whispered. "Nothing at all. Nothing at all." West looked down into his white face for a moment longer, then stepped away. "Now, if you would be so good as to reopen the forges for me. We have a great deal of work to get through." Valimir blinked for a moment. "Of course. I will have them lit once." West turned on his heel and stalked off, knowing the man was glowering daggers at his back, knowing that he had made yet another bad situation worse. One more highborn enemy among the many. The really galling thing was that the man was right. Without Burr, he was as good as finished. He had no family apart from that sister of his. Damn it, his head hurt. "Why me?" he hissed to himself. "Why?" There was still a lot to do today. Enough for a whole day's work on its own, but West could take no more. His head hurt so badly that he could hardly see. He had to lie down in the dark, with a wet cloth over his face, if only for an hour, if only for a minute. He fumbled in his pocket for his key, his other hand clamped over his aching eyes, his teeth locked together. Then he heard a sound on the other side of the door, a faint clink of glass. "R.D. No," he hissed to himself. "Not now. Why the hell had he ever given her a key?" Cursing softly, he raised his fist to knock. Knocking on his own door, that was where he was now. His fist never made it to the wood. A most unpleasant image began to form in the back of his mind. Arde and Luthar, naked and sweaty, writhing around on his carpet. He turned his key swiftly in the lock and shoved the door open. She was standing by the window, alone, and, he was relieved to see, fully dressed. He was less pleased to see her filling a glass right to the brim from the decanter, though. She raised an eyebrow at him as he burst through the door. "Oh, it's you. Who the hell else would it be?" snapped West. "These are my rooms, aren't they?" Somebody's not in the best of moods this morning. A bit of wine slopped over the rim of her glass and onto the table. She wiped it up with her hand and sucked her fingers, then took a long swig from the glass for good measure. Her every movement niggled at him. West grimaced and shoved the door shut. "Do you have to drink so much? I understand that a young lady should have a beneficial pastime." Her words were careless, as usual, but even through his headache West could tell there was something strange going on. She kept glancing towards the desk, then she was moving towards it. He got there first, snatched up a piece of paper from the top, one line written on it. "What's this?" "Nothing. Give it me." He held her away with one arm and read it. The usual place, tomorrow night, West's skin prickled with horror. "Nothing, nothing." He shook the letter under his sister's nose. Arde turned away from him, flicking her head as you might at a fly, saying nothing, but slurping noisily from her glass. West ground his teeth. "It's Luthar, isn't it? I didn't say so. You didn't have to." The paper crumpled up into a tiny ball in his wet tech-knuckled hand. He half-turned towards the door, every muscle tensed and trembling. It was the most he could do to stop himself dashing out and throttling the little bastard right now. But he was just able to make himself think for a moment. Jezal had let him down, and badly, that ungrateful shit. But it was hardly that shocking the man was an ass. You keep your wine in a paper bag, you shouldn't be too upset when it leaks. Besides, Jezal wasn't the one writing the letters. What good would stepping on his neck do? There would always be more empty-headed young men in the world. "Just where are you going with this, Arde?" She sat down on the settle and glared at him frostily over the rim of her glass. "With what, brother? You know with what. Aren't we family? Can't we be candid with each other? If you have something to say, you can out and say it. Where do you think I'm going? I think you're going straight to shit since you ask." He squeezed his voice back down with the greatest of difficulty. "This business with Luthar has gone way too far. Letters. I warned him. But it seems he wasn't the problem. What are you thinking? Are you thinking at all? It has to stop before people start to talk." He felt a suffocating tightness in his chest, took a deep breath, but his voice burst out anyway. "They're damn well talking already. It stops now. Do you hear me?" "I hear you," she said carelessly, "but who cares what they think?" "I care." He nearly screamed it. "Do you know how hard I have to work? Do you think I'm a fool? You know what you're about, Arde." Her face was turning sullen, but he forged on. "It's not as though this is the first time. Must I remind you, your luck with men has not exactly been the best. Not with the men in my family, at least." She was sitting bolt upright now, face tight and pale with anger. "And what would you know about my luck? We've hardly talked in 10 years. We're talking now," shouted West, flinging the crumpled bit of paper across the room. "Have you thought how this might turn out? What if you were to get him? Have you considered that? Would his family be charmed by the blushing bride, do you think? At best they'd never speak to you. At worst they'd cut you both off." He pointed a shaking finger at the door. "Haven't you noticed he's a vain, arrogant swine? They all are. How would he manage, do you think, without his allowance? Without his friends in high places? He wouldn't know where to begin. How could you be happy with each other?" His head was ready to split in half, but he ranted on. "And what happens if, as is far more likely, you can't get him? What then? You'd be finished. Have you thought on that? You've come close enough before. And you're supposed to be the clever one. You're making a laughingstock of yourself." He almost choked on his rage. "Of both of us." Arde gave a gasp. "Now we see it," she nearly screamed at him. "No one cares a shit for me, but if your reputation is in danger, you fucking stupid bitch." The decanter flew, spinning across the room. It crashed against the wall not far from Arde's head, sending fragments of glass flying and wine running down the plaster. It made him more furious. "Why don't you fucking listen?" He was across the room in an instant. Arde looked surprised, just for a moment. Then there was a sharp click, his fist catching her in the face as she got up. She didn't fall far. His hands caught her before she hit the ground, yanked her up, then flung her back against the wall. "You'll be the end of us." Her head smacked against the plaster once, twice, 3 times. One hand grabbed hold of her neck. Teeth bared. Body crushed her against the wall. A little snort in her throat as the fingers began to squeeze. You selfish, useless, fucking whore. Hair was tangled across her face. He could only see a narrow slice of skin, the corner of a mouth, one dark eye. The eye stared back at him, painless, fearless, empty, flat like a corpse. Squeeze, snort, squeeze, squeeze. West came to his senses with a sickening jolt. The fingers snapped open. He jerked the hand away. His sister stayed upright against the wall. He could hear her breathing, short gasps. Or was that him? His head was splitting. The eye was still staring at him. He must have imagined it. Must have. Any second now he would wake up. The nightmare would be over. A dream. Then she pushed the hair out of her face. Her skin was candle wax, pasty white. The trickle of blood from her nose looked almost black against it. The pink marks stood out vivid on her neck. The marks the fingers made. His fingers. Real then. West's stomach churned. His mouth opened but no sound came out. He looked at the blood on her lip, and he wanted to be sick. RD. He was so disgusted he half vomited as he said the word. He could taste the bile at the back of his mouth, but his voice wouldn't stop gurgling away. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Are you all right? I've had worse. She reached up slowly and touched her lip with a fingertip. The blood smeared out across her mouth. RD. One hand reached out to her. Then he jerked it back, afraid of what it might do. I'm sorry? He was always sorry. Don't you remember? He'd hold us and cry afterwards. Always sorry. But it never stopped him the next time. Have you forgotten? West gagged, choked back vomit again. If she'd wept and ranted and beat him with her fists, it would have been easier to bear. Anything but this. He tried never to think about it, but he hadn't forgotten. No, he whispered. I remember. Did you think he stopped when you left? He got worse. Only then I'd hide on my own. I used to dream that you'd come back and save me. But when you did come back, it wasn't for long. And things weren't the same between us. And you did nothing. RD. I didn't know. You knew. But you got away. It was easier to do nothing. To pretend. I understand. And do you know, I don't even blame you. It was some kind of comfort back then to know you got away. The day he died was the happiest of my life. The day he died was the happiest of my life. He was our father. Oh yes, my bad luck. Bad luck with men. I cried at the grave like a dutiful daughter. Cried and cried until the mourners feared for my reason. Then I lay in bed awake until everyone was sleeping. I crept out of the house. I went back to the grave. I stood a while looking down. Then I fucking pissed on it. I pulled up my shift and I squatted down and I pissed on him, and all the while I was thinking it'll be nobody's dog anymore. She wiped the blood from her nose on the back of her hand. You should have seen how happy I was when you sent for me. I read the letter over and over. The pathetic little dreams all came alive again. Hope, eh? What a fucking curse. Off to live with my brother, my protector. He'll look out for me. Hell help me. Now maybe I can have a life. But I find you different than I remembered. All grown up. First you ignore me. Then you lecture me. Then you hit me. And now you're sorry. Truly your father's son, he groaned. It was as if she was sticking a needle in him, right in his skull. Less than he deserved. She was right. He had failed her. Long before today, while he had been playing with swords and kissing the asses of people who despised him, she had been suffering. A little effort was all it would have taken, but he could never face it. Every minute he had spent with her he felt the guilt, like a rock in his gut, weighing him down, unbearable. She stepped away from the wall. Perhaps I'll go and pay a call on Jezal. He may be the shallowest idiot in the whole city. But I don't think he'd ever raise a hand to me, do you? She pushed him out of the way and made for the door. RD. He caught hold of her arm. Please. RD. I'm sorry. She stuck her tongue out, curled it into a tube, and blew bloody spit through it. It splattered softly down the front of his uniform. That's for your sorry bastard. The door banged shut in his face. Chapter 4. Each man worships himself. Pharaoh stared at the big pink through narrowed eyes, and he stared back. It had been going on for a good while now. Not all the time, but most of it. Staring. They were all ugly, these soft white things. But this one was something special, hideous. She knew that she was scarred, and weathered by sun and wind, worn down by years in the wilderness. But the pale skin on this one's face looked like a shield, hard, used in battle, chopped, gouged, torn, dented. It was surprising to see the eyes still alive in a face so battered, but they were, and they were watching her. She had decided he was dangerous. Not just big, but strong, brutal strong. Twice her weight, maybe, and his thick neck was all sinew. She could feel the strength coming off him. She wouldn't have been surprised if he could lift her with one hand, but that didn't worry her too much. He'd have to get a hold on her first. Big and strong can make a man slow. Slow and dangerous don't mix. Scars didn't worry her either. They just meant he'd been in a lot of fights. They didn't say whether he'd won. It was other things. The way he sat still, but not quite relaxed. Ready, patient. The way his eyes moved, cunning, careful, from her to the rest of the room, then back to her. Dark eyes, watching, thoughtful, weighing her up. Thick veins on the backs of his hands, but long fingers, clever fingers, lines of dirt under the nails. One finger missing, a white stump. She didn't like any of it. Smelled like danger. She wouldn't want to fight this one unarmed. But she'd given her knife over to that pink on the bridge. She'd been on the very point of stabbing him, but at the last moment she'd changed her mind. Something in his eyes had reminded her of Aruf, before the Gurkish stuck his head on a spear. Sad and level, as if he understood her, as if she was a person, and not a thing. At the last moment, despite herself, she'd given the blade away, allowed herself to be led in here. Stupid. She regretted it now, bitterly. But she'd fight any way she could, if she had to. Most people never realize how full the world is of weapons. Things to throw, or throw enemies onto. Things to break, or use as clubs. Wound-up cloths to strangle with. Dirt to fling in faces. Failing that, she'd bite his throat out. She curled her lips back and showed him her teeth to prove it. But he seemed not to notice. Just sat there watching. Silent, still, ugly and dangerous. Fucking pinks, she hissed to herself. The thin one, by contrast, hardly seemed dangerous at all. Ill-looking, with long hair like a woman's. Awkward and twitchy, licking his lips. He would sneak the odd glance at her, but look away as soon as she scowled over at him, swallowing, the knobbly lump in his neck squirming up and down. He seemed scared, no threat, but Pharaoh kept him in the corner of her eye while she watched the big one. Best not to dismiss him entirely. Life had taught her to expect surprises. That just left the old man. She didn't trust one of these pinks, but she trusted this bald one least of all. Many deep lines on his face, round his eyes, round his nose. Cruel lines. Hard, heavy bones in his cheeks. Big, thick hands, white hairs on the backs of them. If she had to kill these three, for all the danger that the big one seemed to offer, she decided she would kill this bald one first. He had the look of a slaver in his eye, staring at her up and down all over, a cold look, judging what she might be worth. Bias, Yulvai called him, and the two old men seemed to know each other well. So, brother, the bald pink was saying in the Cantic tongue. Though it was plain enough they weren't related. How is it in the great empire of Gurkal? Yulvai sighed. Only a year since he seized the crown, and Uthman has broken the last of the rebels, and brought the governors firmly to heel. Already the young emperor is more feared than ever his father was. Uthman ul-Dasht, his soldiers call him, and proudly. Almost all of Kanta is in his grip. He reigns supreme all round the southern sea, aside from Dagaska. True, but his eyes are bent on it. His armies swarm toward the peninsula, and his agents are ever busy behind Dagaska's great walls. Now that there is war in the north, it cannot be long before he feels the time is ripe to lay siege to the city. And when he does, I do not think it can stand long against him. Are you sure? The Union still controls the seas? Yulwei frowned. We saw ships, brother, many great ships. The Gurkish have built a fleet, a powerful one, in secret. They must have begun years ago, during the last war. I fear the Union will control the seas but little longer. A fleet? I'd hoped to have a few more years in which to prepare. The bald pink sounded grim. My plans only become the more urgent. She was bored with their talk. She was used to being always on the move, keeping always one stride ahead, and she hated to stand still, stay too long in one place. and the Gurkish would find you. She wasn't interested in being an exhibit for these curious pinks to stare at. She sauntered off around the room while the two old men made endless words, scowling and sucking her teeth. She swung her arms around. She kicked at the worn boards of the floor. She poked at the cloths on the walls and peered behind them, ran her fingers along the edges of the furniture, clicked her tongue and snapped her teeth together. Making everyone nervous, she passed by the big ugly pink in the chair, almost close enough for her swinging hand to touch his pitted skin, just to show him that she didn't care a shit for his size or his scars or anything else. Then she strutted over to the nervous one, the skinny pink with the long hair. He swallowed as she came close. "SSSS," she hissed at him. He muttered something and shuffled away, and she stepped up to the open window in his place, looking out, turning her back on the room, just to show the pinks she didn't care a shit for any of them. There were gardens outside the window, trees, plants, wide sweeps of lawn neatly arranged. Groups of fat, pale men and women lazed around in the sun the carefully cut grass, stuffing their sweaty faces with food, swilling down drink. She scowled down at them. Fat, ugly, lazy pinks, with no god but eating and idleness. Gardens, she sneered. There had been gardens in Uthman's palace. She used to look at them from the tiny window of her room, her cell, long before he became Uthmal-Dasht, when he had only been the emperor's youngest son, when she had been one among his many slaves, his prisoner. Pharaoh leaned forward and spat out of the window. She hated gardens. She hated cities altogether. Places of slavery, fear, degradation. Their walls were the walls of a prison. The sooner she was gone from this accursed place, the happier she would be, or the less unhappy at least. She turned away from the window and scowled again. They were all staring at her. The one called Bayaz was the first to speak. "It certainly is quite a striking thing you've discovered, brother. You wouldn't miss her in a crowd, eh? Are you sure she's what I'm looking for?" Yu Wei looked at her for a minute. "As sure as I can be. I'm standing right here," she growled at them. But the bold pink went on talking as though she couldn't hear. "Does she feel pain?" "But little. She fought an eater on the road." "Really?" Bayaz chuckled softly to himself. "How badly did it hurt her?" "Badly. But in 2 days she was walking. In a week she was healed. She shows not a scratch from it. That is not normal. We have both seen many things that are not normal in our times. We must be sure." The bald man reached into a pocket. Pharaoh watched suspiciously as he pulled out his fist, placed it on the table. When he took it away, 2 smooth, polished stones lay on the wood. The bald man leaned forward. "Tell me, Pharaoh, which is the blue stone?" She stared at him, hard, then down at the stones. There was no difference between them. They were all watching her, closer than ever now, and she ground her teeth. "That one." She pointed to the one on the left. Bayaz smiled. "Exactly the answer I was hoping for." Pharaoh shrugged her shoulders. Lucky, she thought, to guess the right one. Then she noticed the look on the big pink's face. He was frowning at the 2 stones, as though he didn't understand. "They both are red," said Bayaz. "You see no colors at all, eh, Pharaoh?" So the bald pink had played a trick on her. She wasn't sure how he could have known, but she was sure she didn't like it. "No one plays tricks on Pharaoh Maljan." She started to laugh. A rough, ugly, unpracticed gurgling. Then she sprang across the table. The look of surprise was just forming on the old pink's face as her fist crunched into his nose. He gave a grunt, chair tipping backwards, sprawling out onto the floor. She scrambled across the table to get at him, but Yu Wei grabbed hold of her leg and dragged her back. Her clawing hands missed the bold bastard's neck and hauled the table over on its side instead, the 2 stones skittering away across the boards. She shook her leg free and went for the old pink as he staggered up from the floor. But Yu Wei caught her arm and pulled her back again, all the while yelling, "Peace!" He got her elbow in his face for his trouble and sagged back against the wall with her on top of him. She was first up, ready to go at the bald bastard again. By now the big one was on his feet, though, and moving forward, still watching her. Pharaoh smiled at him, fists clenched at her sides. Now she would see how dangerous he really was. He took another step. Then Bayaz put an arm out to stop him. He had his other hand clasped to his nose, trying to staunch the flow of blood. He started to chuckle. "Very good," he coughed. Very fierce and damn quick, too. Without a doubt, you're what we're after. I hope you will accept my apologies, Pharaoh. What? For my awful manners. He wiped blood from his upper lip. I deserved no less, but I had to be sure. I am sorry. Am I forgiven? He looked somehow different now, though nothing had changed. Friendly, considerate, honest. Sorry, but it took more than that to win her trust. A lot more. Well, see, she hissed. That's all I ask. That, and that you give Yulwei and I a moment to discuss some matters. Matters best discussed in private. It's all right, Pharaoh, said Yulwei. They are friends. She was damn sure they weren't her friends. But she allowed him to shepherd her out of the door behind the two pinks. Just try not to kill any of them. This room was much like the other. They had to be rich, these pinks, for all they didn't look it. Great big fireplace made of dark veined stone, cushions and soft cloth round the window, covered in flowers and birds in tiny stitches. There was a painting of a stern man with a crown on his head, frowning down at Pharaoh from the wall. She frowned back at him. Luxury. Pharaoh hated luxury even more than she hated gardens. Luxury meant captivity more surely than the bars of a cage. Luxury meant captivity more surely than the bars of a cage. Soft furniture spelled danger more surely than weapons. Hard ground and cold water was all she needed. Soft things make you soft, and she wanted no part of that. There was another man waiting in there, walking round and round with his hands behind his back, as though he didn't like to stand still too long. Not quite a pink, his leathery skin was somewhere between hers and theirs in tone. Head shaved, like a priest. Pharaoh didn't like that. She hated priests most of all. His eyes lit up when he saw her, though, for all her sneering at him, and he hurried over. A strange little man in travel-worn clothes. The top of his head came up no higher than Pharaoh's mouth. I am Brother Longfoot, flapping his hands around all over the place, off the Great Order of Navigators. Lucky for you. Pharaoh turned her shoulder towards him, straining her ears to hear what the two old men were saying beyond the door, but Longfoot was not deterred. It is lucky. Yes, yes, it most certainly is. God has truly blessed me. I declare that never, in all of history, has a man been so well suited to his profession, or a profession to a man, as I, Brother Longfoot, am suited to the noble science of navigation. From the snow-covered mountains of the far north to the sun-drenched sands of the utmost south, the whole world is my home, truly. He smiled at her with a look of sickening self-satisfaction. Pharaoh ignored him. The two pinks, the big one and the scrawny one, were talking to each other on the far side of the room. They spoke in some language she didn't understand. Sounded like pigs grunting. Talking about her, maybe, but she didn't care. They went out another door, leaving her alone with the priest, still flapping his lips. There are few nations within the circle of the world to which I, Brother Longfoot, am a stranger, and yet I am at a loss as to your origins. He waited expectantly, but Pharaoh said nothing. You would like me to guess, then? Indeed, it is a riddle. Let me see. Your eyes have the shape of the people of distant Seljuk, where the black mountains rise sheer from the sparkling sea. Indeed they do. And yet your skin is astop your mouth, cunt. The man paused in mid-sentence, coughed and moved away, leaving Pharaoh to attend to the voices on the other side of the door. She smiled to herself. The wood was thick, and the sounds were muffled, but the two old men had not reckoned on the sharpness of her ears. They were still speaking in Cantic. Now that idiot of a navigator was quiet, she could make out every word that Yulwei was saying. Kalu breaks the second law, so you must break the first? I like it not, Bayaz. Juvens would never have allowed this. Pharaoh frowned. Yulwei had a strange note in his voice. Fear, the second law. He had spoken of it to the eaters. Pharaoh remembered. It is forbidden to eat the flesh of men. She heard the bald pink next. The first law is a paradox. All magic comes from the other side, even ours. Whenever you change a thing, you touch the world below. Whenever you make a thing, you borrow from the other side. And there is always a cost, but the cost of this might be too high. It is a cursed thing, this seed, a damned thing. Nothing but chaos grows from it. The sons of Eus, so great in wisdom and power, this seed was the end of them, of all of them, in different ways. Are you wiser than Juven's Bias? Are you more cunning than Canidius? Are you stronger than Glustrad? None is brother. But tell me, how many eaters has Kalul made? A long pause. I cannot be sure. How many? Another pause. Perhaps 200. Perhaps more. The priesthood scour the south for those with any promise. Faster and faster now he makes them, but most are young and weak, 200 or more, and growing all the time. Many are weak, but among them are some that might be a match for you or I. Those that were Kalul's apprentices in the old time, the one they called the East Wind, and those cursed bloody twins. Damn those bitches, Yulway groaned. Not to mention Mamoon, whose lies began this chaos. The trouble was well rooted before he was even born, you know it, Bias. Still Mamoon was in the Badlands. I felt him near. He has grown terrible strong. You know that I am right. Meanwhile our numbers hardly grow. I thought this one, Kwai, showed promise. We need only 100 more like him and 20 years in which to train them. Then we might stand on equal terms. No, brother, no. We must use fire against fire. We must use fire against fire. Even if the fire burns you and all creation to ashes, let me go to Sarkant. Kalul might yet hear reasoned laughter. He has enslaved half the world. When will you wake, Yulwai? When he has enslaved the rest of it. I cannot afford to lose you, brother. Remember, Bias, there are worse things than Kalul. Far worse. Far worse. His voice dropped to a whisper, and Pharaoh strained to hear. The tellers of secrets are always listening. Enough, Yulwai. It is better not even to think of it. Pharaoh frowned. What was this nonsense? Tellers of secrets? What secrets? Remember what Juvens told you, Bias. Beware of pride. You have been using the art. I know it. I see a shadow on you. Damn your shadows. I do what I must. Remember what Juvens told you, Yulway. One cannot watch forever. Time is short, and I will watch no longer. I am first. It is my decision to make. Have I not always followed where you have led? Always, even when my conscience told me otherwise. And have I ever led you wrong? That remains to be seen. You are first, Bias, but you are not Juvens. It is my part to question, and that of Zacharias too. He will like this still less than I. Far less. It must be done. But others will pay the price, as they always have. This Northman, Ninefingers, he can speak to the spirits? Pharaoh frowned. Spirits? The nine-fingered pink had scarcely looked as if he could speak to other humans. And if you find the seed, came Yue's voice from behind the door. You mean for Pharaoh to carry it? She has the blood, and someone must. Be careful then, Bias. I know you, remember. Few better. Give me your word that you will keep her safe. Even after she has served your purpose, I will guard her more closely than I would my own child. Guard her closer than you did the Maker's child, and I will be satisfied. A long silence. Pharaoh worked her jaw as she thought on what she had heard. Juvens, Canidius, Zacharias, the strange names, meant nothing to her. And what kind of seed could burn all creation to ashes? She wanted no part of any such thing. She was sure of that. Her place was in the south, fighting the Gurkish with weapons that she understood. The door opened, and the two old men stepped through. They could hardly have looked more different. One dark-skinned, tall and bony with long hair. The other white-skinned, heavy-built, and bald. She looked at them suspiciously. It was the white one who spoke first. Pharaoh, I have an offer too. I am not going with you, old pink fool. The slightest shadow of annoyance flitted across the bald man's face, but was quickly mastered. Why? What other business have you which is so very pressing? That needed no thinking about. Vengeance, her favorite word. I see. You hate the Gurkish. Yes, they owe you a debt for what they have done to you. Yes, for taking your family, your people, your country. Yes, for making you a slave, he whispered. She glowered back at him, wondering how he knew so much about her, wondering whether to go for him again. They have robbed you, Pharaoh, robbed you of everything. They have stolen your life from you. If I were you, if I had suffered as you have suffered, there would not be enough blood in all the South to satisfy me. I would see every Gurkish soldier made a corpse before I was satisfied. I would see every Gurkish city burn before I was satisfied. I would see their emperor rotting in a cage before his own palace before I was satisfied. Yes, she hissed, a fierce smile across her face. He was talking her language now. Yulvai had never talked so. Perhaps this old pink wasn't so bad after all. You understand. That is why I must go south. No, Pharaoh. It was the bald man grinning now. You do not realize the chance that I am offering you. The emperor does not truly rule in Kanta. Mighty though he seems, he dances to the tune of another, a hand well hidden. Kalul, they call him. The prophet, Bayaz nodded. If you are cut, do you hate the knife or the one who wields it? The emperor, the Gurkish, they are but Kalul's tools, Pharaoh. Emperors come and go, but the prophet is always there, behind them, whispering, suggesting, ordering. He is the one that owes you. Kalul, Talul. Yes, the eaters had used that name. Kalul, the prophet. The emperor's palace was filled with priests. Everyone knew it. The palaces of the governors too. Priests. They were everywhere, swarming, like insects, in the cities, in the villages, in amongst the soldiers, always spreading their lies, whispering, suggesting, ordering. Yulwei was frowning, unhappy, but Pharaoh knew that the old pink was right. Yes, I see it. Help me, and I will give you vengeance, Pharaoh. Real vengeance. Not one dead soldier or 10, but thousands, tens of thousands. Perhaps the emperor himself, who knows? He shrugged, and half turned away from her. Still, I cannot force you. Go back to the Badlands if you wish, hide and run, and grub in the dust like a rat. If that satisfies you, if that is the full measure of your vengeance, the eaters want you now. Kalul's children, without us they will have you, and sooner rather than later. Still, the choice is yours. Pharaoh frowned. All those years in the wilderness, fighting tooth and nail, always running, had got her nothing. No vengeance worthy of the word. If it had not been for Yulwei, she would be finished now. White bones in the desert, meat in the bellies of the eaters, in the cage before the emperor's palace, rotting. She could not say no, and she knew it, but she did not like it. This old man had known exactly what to offer her. She hated to have no choice. I will think about it, she said. Again, the slightest shadow of anger on the bald pink's face, quickly covered. Think about it then, but not for long. The emperor's soldiers are massing, and time is short. He followed the others out of the room, leaving her alone with Yulwei. I do not like these pinks, she said, loud enough for the old one to hear her in the corridor, and then more softly, do we have to go with them? You do. I must return to the south. What? Someone must keep watch on the Gurkish. No. Yulwei began to laugh. Twice you have tried to kill me. Once you have tried to run away from me. But now that I am leaving, you want me to stay? There's no understanding you, Pharaoh. She frowned. This bald one says he can give me vengeance. Does he lie? No. Then I must go with him. I know. That is why I brought you here. She could think of nothing to say. She looked down at the floor, but Yulwei surprised her by stepping forward suddenly. She raised her hand to ward off a blow, but instead he put his arms round her and squeezed her tightly. A strange feeling, being so close to someone else, warm. Then Yulwei stepped away, one hand on her shoulder. Walk in God's footsteps, Pharaoh Maljan. They have no God here. Say rather that they have many, many. Had you not noticed? Here, each man worships himself, she nodded. That seemed close to the truth. Be careful, Pharaoh, and listen to Bayaz. He is the first of my order, and few indeed are wise as he. I do not trust him. Yulwei leaned closer. I did not tell you to trust him. Then he smiled and turned his back. She watched him walk slowly to the door, then out into the corridor. She heard his bare feet flapping away on the tiles, the bangles on his arms jingling softly, leaving her alone with the luxury and the gardens and the pinks. Chapter 5. Old Friends. There was a thumping knock at the door, and Glokta jerked his head up, left eye suddenly twitching. "Who the hell comes knocking at this hour? Frost, Severard? Or someone else? Superior Goyle, maybe, come to pay me a visit with his circus freaks. Might the Arch Lector have grown tired of his toy cripple already? One could hardly say the feast went according to plan, and His Eminence is hardly the forgiving type." Body found floating by the docks. The knocking came again. Loud, confident knocking, the kind that demands the door be opened before it's broken down. "I'm coming," he shouted, voice cracking slightly as he prized himself out from behind his table, legs wobbly. "I'm just coming." He snatched up his cane and limped to the front door, took a deep breath, and fumbled with the latch. It was not Frost or Severard, nor was it Goyle, or one of his freakish practicals. It was someone much more unexpected. Glokta raised an eyebrow, then leaned against the doorframe. Major West, what a surprise. Sometimes, when old friends meet, things are instantly as they were all those years before. The friendship resumes, untouched, as though there had been no interruption. "Sometimes, but not now, Inquisitor Glokta," mumbled West, hesitant, awkward, embarrassed. "I'm sorry to bother you so late." "Don't mention it," said Glokta, with icy formality. The Major nearly winced. "May I come in?" "Of course." Glokta shut the front door behind him, then limped after West into his dining room. The Major squeezed himself into one of the chairs and Glokta took another. They sat there facing each other for a moment, without speaking. What the hell does he want, at this hour or any other? Glokta scrutinized his old friend's face in the glow from the fire and the one flickering candle. Now that he could see him more clearly, he realized West had changed. He looks old. His hair was thinning at the temples, going gray round his ears. His face was pale, pinched, slightly hollow. He looks worried, ground down, close to the edge. West looked round at the mean room, the mean fire, the mean furniture, cautiously up at Glokta, then quickly down at the floor, nervous as if he had something picking at his mind. He looks ill at ease. As well he might. He did not seem ready to break the silence, so Glokta did it for him. "So how long has it been, eh? Apart from that night in town. And we can hardly count that, can we?" The memory of that unfortunate meeting hung between them for a moment like a fart. Then West cleared his throat. 9 years. 9 years. Imagine that. Since we stood on the ridge, old friends together, looking down towards the river, down towards the bridge and all those Gurkish on the other side. Seems a lifetime ago, doesn't it? 9 years. I can remember you pleading with me not to go down there, but I was having none of it. What a fool I was, eh? Thought I was our only hope. Thought I was invincible. You saved us all that day. Saved the whole army, did I? How wonderful. I dare say if I died on that bridge there'd be statues of me all over the place. Shame I didn't really. Shame for everyone. West winced and shifted in his chair, looking ever more uncomfortable. "I looked for you afterwards," he mumbled. "You looked for me. How hugely fucking noble. What a true friend. Precious little good it did me. Dragged off in agony with my leg hacked to mincemeat. And that was just the beginning. You did not come to discuss old times, West. No, I didn't. I came about my sister." Glokta paused. He had certainly not expected that answer. "RD, yes. I'm leaving for England soon and I was hoping that perhaps you could keep an eye on her for me while I'm away." West's eyes flickered up nervously. "You always had a way with women." Sand Glokta grimaced at the sound of his first name. No one called him that anymore. No one besides my mother. "You always knew just what to say. Do you remember those 3 sisters? What were their names? You had them all eating out of your hand." West smiled, but Glokta couldn't. He remembered, but the memories were weak now, colorless, faded. The memories of another man. A dead man. "My life began in Gurkhul, in the Emperor's prisons. The memories since then are much more real. Stretched out in bed like a corpse after I came back, in the darkness, waiting for friends who never came." He looked at West and he knew that his glance was terribly cold. "Do you think to win me with your honest face and your talk of old times, like a long-lost dog at last come faithfully home? I know better. You stink, West. You smell like betrayal. That memory at least is mine. Glokta leaned back slowly in his chair. Sandan Glokta, he murmured, as though recalling a name he once knew. Whatever became of him, West? What? You know that friend of yours, that dashing young man, handsome, proud, fearless, magic touch with the women, loved and respected by all, destined for great things. Wherever did he go? West looked back, puzzled and unsure of himself, and said nothing. Glokta lurched towards him, hands spread out on the table, lips curling back to show his ruined mouth. Dead! He died on the bridge. And what remains? A fucking ruin with his name. A limping, skulking shadow. A crippled ghost, clinging to life the way the smell of piss clings to a beggar. He has no friends, this loathsome fucking remnant, and he wants none. Get you gone, West. Go back to Varus and to Luthar, and the rest of those empty bastards. There's no one here, you know. Glokta's lips trembled and spat with revulsion. He wasn't sure who disgusted him more, West or himself. The Major blinked, his jaw muscles working silently. He got shakily to his feet. I'm sorry, he said over his shoulder. Tell me, shouted Glokta, bringing him up short of the door. The rest of them, they stuck to me so long as I was useful, so long as I was going up. I always knew it. I wasn't so very surprised they wanted nothing to do with me when I came back. But you, West, I always thought you were a better friend than that, a better man. A better man. I always thought that you alone would come to visit me. He shrugged. I suppose I was wrong. Glokta turned away, frowning towards the fire, waiting for the sound of the front door closing. She didn't tell you? Glokta looked back. Who? Your mother, he snorted. My mother? Tell me what? I did come. Twice. As soon as I learned that you were back, I came. Your mother turned me away at the gates of your estate. She said that you were too ill to take visitors, and that in any case you wanted nothing more to do with the army, and nothing more to do with me in particular. I came back again, a few months later. I thought I owed you that much. That time, a servant came to see me off. Later I heard that you had joined the Inquisition and left for England. I put you out of my mind, until we met. That night in the city, West trailed off. It took a while for his words to sink in, and by the time they had, Glokta realized that his mouth was hanging open. So simple. No conspiracy. No web of betrayal. He almost wanted to laugh at the stupidity of it. My mother turned him away at the gate, and I never thought to doubt that no one came. She always hated West. A most unsuitable friend, far beneath her precious son. No doubt she blamed him for what happened to me. I should have guessed, but I was too busy wallowing in pain and bitterness, too busy being tragic. He swallowed. You came. West shrugged. For what it's worth. Well, what can we do, except try to do better? Glokta blinked and took a deep breath. I'm sorry. Forget what I said if you can. Please. Sit down. You were saying something about your sister. Yes. Yes, my sister. West fumbled his way back to his seat, looking down at the floor, his face taking on that worried, guilty look again. We're leaving for England soon, and I don't know when I'll be back, or if, I suppose. She'll be without any friends in the city, and, well, I think you met her once, when you came to our house, of course, and a good deal more recently than that, in fact. You did? Yes, with our mutual friend, Captain Luthar. West turned even paler. There is something more to this than he is telling me. But Glokta did not feel like putting his club foot through his one friendship quite yet, not so soon after it had been reborn. He stayed quiet, and after a moment, the Major went on. Life has been difficult for her. I could have done something. I should have done something. He stared miserably down at the table, and an ugly spasm ran across his face. I know that one. One of my own favorites, self-loathing. But I chose to let other things get in the way, and I did my best to forget all about it. And I pretended that everything was fine. She has suffered, and I am to blame. He coughed, then swallowed awkwardly. His lip began to tremble, and he covered his face with his hands. My fault. If something were to happen to her. His shoulders shook silently, and Glokta raised his eyebrows. He was used to men crying in his presence, of course, but I usually have at least to show them the instruments first. Come on, Colin. This isn't like you. He reached slowly across the table, half pulled his hand back, and then patted his sobbing friend awkwardly on the shoulder. "You've made some mistakes, but haven't we all? They're in the past and can't be changed. There's nothing to be done now except to do better, eh? What? Can it really be me talking? Inquisitor Glokta, comforter of the needy." But West seemed reassured. He lifted his head, wiped his runny nose, stared up hopefully at Glokta with wet eyes. You're right, of course. I have to make amends. Have to. Will you help me, Sand? Will you look after her while I'm gone? I'll do whatever I can for her, Column. You can depend on me. I was once proud to call you my friend, and I would be again. Strange, but Glokta could almost feel a tear in his own eye. Me? Can it be? Inquisitor Glokta, trustworthy friend? Inquisitor Glokta, protector of vulnerable young women. He almost laughed out loud at the idea, and yet here he was. He never would have thought that he needed one, but it felt good to have a friend again. "Holit," said Glokta. "What? Those 3 sisters, their name was Holit." He chuckled to himself, the memory filtering through a little clearer than before. "They had a thing about fencing. Loved it. Something about the sweat, maybe. I think that was when I decided to take it up." West laughed, then screwed up his face as if he was trying to remember something. "What was our quartermaster's name? He had a thing for the youngest one. Was out of his mind with jealousy. What the hell was that man's name? Fat Man." The name was not so very difficult for Glokta to recall. Ruse. Salem Ruse. Ruse! That's the one! I'd forgotten all about him. Ruse! He could tell a story like no one else, that man. We'd sit up all night listening to him, all of us rolling with laughter. Whatever became of him? Glokta paused for a moment. "I think he left the army, to become a merchant of some sort." He waved his hand dismissively. "I heard he moved north. That's it for today's video. The next part arrives tomorrow. Subscribe so you don't miss it."